Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post. My name is Ryan Sampson, but he is the star of the show, Joel Sherman. He's down at the All-Star game in Texas. Joel, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It's a little earlier here than there. I know you think it's hot there. It's a little hotter here than there. Yeah, today is All-Star game as we're doing it. We'll get in an All-Star game tonight. Somehow MLB made a big deal that Paul Skeens was going to start the game and then allowed Aaron Judge to be the fourth hitter in the American League lineup, and we might not see Skeens versus Judge. So somehow I'm blown away by the planning. Like, who stands up in the room and goes, does Stephen Kwan really have to bat in the first inning? Just make it Gunnar Henderson, Juan Soto, and Aaron Judge. So you were assured of Skeens versus those three guys. No knock on Kwan, who's had a great first year, but you're putting on a spectacle, and whatever. It's sometimes stuff happens and it blows me away.
Spectacle, unlike last night's home run derby. Joel, you're not wrong there, and I like that you're coming out hot and heavy here. The Yankees actually go into the All-Star break playing a little bit better, and that's where I want to start off with first pitch. Since last time we spoke, they enter the All-Star break at the record of 58-40. They take 2 out of 3 and finally win a series, their first in 8 series against the Orioles, after losing another series to the Tampa Bay Rays. So, Joel, I want to start there with what you've seen from this team in those 3 games against the Orioles. Probably should have swept them if we didn't see the collapse defensively by Volpe and Verdugo in the 9th inning. What are you seeing from this Yankees team? Do you get a sense that there is maybe a little bit of, and I know we talked about the Jekyll and Hyde of this team, right? Like, we've seen the worst month. They've been the worst team in baseball, arguably, this past month. And then the first 2 months of the season, they were the best team in baseball. Were you seeing signs of life, you think, in this series against the Orioles and even against the Rays a little bit? Or is there still really a lot of concerns with this team that you have to see how this plays out coming out of the All-Star break?
I will say it's a very Yankee-centric way to look at it, where you say they should have swept them without the 2 botched defensive plays in the bottom of the 9th. You know, conversely, if in the bottom of the 9th, Clay Holmes had given up a 3-run homer to lose it just straight, 2 walks and a 3-run homer, you would also said they blew it. Well, Baltimore blew it in the top of the inning, right? Baltimore's winning the game cleanly 3-2. And then it's their closer, who I don't trust to play in a big game, Craig Kimbrell, walk homer. So, you know, in a way, the Yankees would have been better off losing that game 3-2. And people would have said, hey, they won 2 out of 3. They played cleanly in the last game. There's still worries about Rodon, who couldn't, finish off hitters in that game. But wow, that was a good series. But because of how it ended, and now there's a week to think about it, pretty much until the next game, it feels bad. Look, I think we did this during the worst of the Yankee stuff, Ryan, where, you do have to over 162 games, where if you believe the Yankees are a good team, and I believe they're a good team, believe they're not as good as 50-22, and they're not as bad as whatever it was, 5-18, whatever that number was. And that's kind of how they looked in the last week before the break in those 2 series. I still think that they have a problem that besieged them last year when it was Aaron Judge and the Pips. And now it's Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and the Pips. There's still the length of the lineup is really, to me, an issue of how many dead spots there are. Is Ben Rice a real guy? I don't know. It's not a ton of at-bats. I know, we've talked about how much I like how he has approached at-bats. He's obviously not afraid, and he has a good approach. But before that home run, he was in his first kind of major league slump. And I would ask, is the league, he can't handle this area or this kind of pitch, and figuring him out? You got to keep running him out there and find that out. You got to find out, is this Shane Spencer, Kevin Moss, Greg Burt, whatever, Shelley Duncan, flash in the pan that you've seen in your lifetime, maybe if you're a Yankee fan? Or is there something really there because he takes good at-bats? I continue to say the same thing. We're at about a month of me saying Austin Wells should be playing regularly because he takes good at-bats. And I think he'll play a lot more now with Jose Trevino not playing. So my call for him to be the DH when he's not playing probably goes out the window, because I would think he starts 3 out of 4 games now until Trevino comes back. And it sounds like Trevino's injury is going to be a bit. But This continues to be, where's Gleyber Torres? Man, DJ LeMahieu looks like a guy who can't get the ball out of the infield. Anthony Volpe has just kind of shut down, and Verdugo shut down. And those last two guys, for that first 70-ish games of the season, Verdugo and Volpe felt like what wins above replacement is kind of trying to capture. They were good at everything. They were good on defense. They were good on the bases, and they were above average on offense. Were they offensive stars? No, but they were good at bats. There was batting average there. They popped the ball every once in a while. Volpe would steal bases. And the offensive game of those two guys over the last month, you could go to the statistics on a place like, say, Fangraphs and just break it down since the beginning of June, Ryan. Those two guys have fallen off the cliff. Verdugo is a placeholder. He's in his walk year.
Yep.
And, the Yankees will probably have Jason Dominguez fill his spot next year on the roster and in the outfield. I think you got to start to ask a question about who Volpe is, which is, he's a good player. Is he more than that? And when people say, oh, he's young, I'm like, I don't know. Come to the All-Star game where Gunnar Henderson is young and Bobby Witt is young and Ellie De La Cruz is young and, Jackson Merrill, who's a shortstop playing center field, is 21. And look at what Mason Wynn is doing in St. Louis, and Zach Neto is doing with the Angels, and Ezekiel Tovar is doing with the Rockies. These are all young shortstops. Before I even get to like Seager and Correa, the established guys, I think Anthony Volpe is a good young player. But I think the young excuse has to go out the window a little when other young shortstops are flourishing, and also when the idea was we were going to see some real offensive advancement this year.
Yeah.
Last year, Anthony Volpe finished with a 666 OPS. Would you like to know what his OPS is as the break, Ryan?
I think and I have it pulled up right here, and I'm looking at it.
Oh, I don't have to guess at it. It was 666 last year.
666, yep.
It's 666 at the break.
It's the same thing.
It's a little more batting average and a lot less power. And by the way, the batting average is about 120 for a month. So that average is sinking. And I think there are questions. Why does he go into long slumps? When he's on the bases, why isn't he running as much? He's a good player. He's durable. He's very good on defense, regardless of how Sunday's game ended. And he's beloved in his clubhouse for his seriousness. Mm-hmm. And that's why the belief and his work ethic. And I think the belief continues to be there's a better version of him. But he's their third best player, and not just in 2024. And so this is a 2024 going forward question, which is just how good is the Yankee shortstop?
Yeah, I think that's a vital question right there, Joel, because there's this thing with Volpe. I remember last year we heard about the chicken parm story, right? Austin Wells is helping him, with his batting and his approach, and how to make sure he's trying to go opposite way, because a lot of pitchers were attacking him outside. His weakness is the outside breaking ball, and it looked like he had discovered a little something, but that lasted maybe 2 weeks, and then he slumped back down into what he was the rest of the season. And I feel like we got the same thing, but just a little bit longer. I had made adjustments, right? He said he fixed his bat approach of the offseason. His swing is a little bit different. He leveled out his swing path. We saw first month that he looked really, really good and special. And you're like, oh, all right, maybe Anthony Volpe's starting to prosper in front of our eyes. And it seems like he's regressed into that same form that he was last year. And that's really concerning. I know that baseball, and this, Joel, more than anyone else, because you talk to scouts, it's all about how teams, kind of deal with you and figure you out as a player, right? Like, I know how I'm going to attack you, with pitches and where in the zone I'm going to go after you. And it feels like a lot of teams have written up how they're going to attack Anthony Volpe, and he hasn't made that adjustment, or I don't know if he has the talent right now or the wherewithal. I don't know. Do you think it falls on more on coaching? Do you think it falls more on the player development side? Is it just simple as it's the player himself, Anthony Volpe? You're really starting to question, is he that good to be able to handle MLB pitching on a day in, day out basis?
Ryan, one of the things I want to try to have is some 20,000 foot. Not all success in baseball is linear. Volpe is unfortunate to some degree that he was taking 12 picks in front of Gunnar Henderson, who showed up on day one and looks like he's going to be an MVP. He was Rookie of the Year last year. Looks like he's going to be an MVP candidate this year. The Yankees had hoped a little bit, I think, that he was on a Bobby Witt trajectory. Bobby Witt's rookie season, you saw like Volpe had 20 homers and 20 steals in defense. There was stuff with Witt, and let's remember, Witt was a second pick in a draft. I mean, people thought great things, but there was enough there where you thought, oh, he could smooth it out and get better. And indeed he did in 2023. And now Witt would probably finish no worse than like fourth for AL MVP this year. So we've seen some young shortstops. And you want to add Ellie De La Cruz, who seems to be smoothing out maybe some of his game. And, I mentioned Jackson Merrill. And it's a great age for shortstops in particular and young shortstops in specific. And some of them are making progress at a much quicker rate than Volpe. And the question is Volpe going to make strides? I would assume he is. He's talented, and there has never been a question about makeup or work ethic. And so there probably is more to go. But what is the ceiling there? And everything is by comparison. Right now, Anthony Volpe is a good major league player. Like when you think about how people are judged, right, they're judged as wins above replacement kind of players. And I think Anthony Volpe will probably finish this season someplace at about a 3.5 win player, which is a very good major league player. But everything's by comparison. That might be the 15th best shortstop in the sport for this year. And as you start to think going forward, we've seen some spillover. By the way, Ellie De La Cruz might not even play shortstop when Matt McClain comes back. The Orioles have developed Jordan Westberg, who's playing second and third base. He was a shortstop because Henderson's there. They traded Joey Ortiz for Corbin Burns, who's a shortstop, but they had other shortstops. They have Jackson Holliday coming, who still might be better than all those. So they might develop 4 shortstops in a very short period who are better than Anthony Volpe. That's a possibility. That's the team the Yankees are going to be dabbling with over the next few years. And so I think Volpe was a good draft pick, when you're picking 30th. And I think he's shown that he has skills. But everything is by comparison, number one, so he's the where is he in the shortstop ranking? And then the other thing is he's kind of how the Yankees built the team, needed to be the third best player on the team. And for about 6 or 7 weeks he was. And now he maybe still is, but it's a different version of that. And we're back to the Yankees being dominated by a great or 2 great guys in the lineup. And where is everyone else? And maybe too much is falling on a 23-year-old. But they really need the 23-year-old to be good.
Right. And I think that's where you're talking about the comparison with the Orioles and even the Royals with Bobby Witt Jr. It's that they have these shortstops that are making such a huge impact for their team, and that is what's helping propel their success, right? The Yankees, like you said, they're hoping that Volpe can be that for them, but it's not working right now. Like it's not developing well. It's carrying over into his defensive game a little bit.
Ryan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So what seems to be strange and what I would describe as worrisome is he doesn't have a slump for 5 days or a week. Like when he kind of falls out of his swing and he starts leaking and gets very kind of like, like where he gets pull conscious away from it.
Yep.
He doesn't. Now, is that the kid? Is that the lack of kind of veteran, somebody to walk over in JD Martinez? Is that hitting instruction? Hey man, let's go to the cage. Here's the video. This is what we're doing. Your 2 cues for what you have to think about with a knee, a shoulder, a hip, whatever. Come on, let's get back into it. Let's work. Because we're now at a month plus where he's not been good. And now maybe the answer is, well, maybe he's not that good. This is what Major League Baseball's hard, and he's going to be a guy who falls into bad slumps. We've seen it good. And then the other thing is, I appreciate trying to take the ball the other way, but the ball's still on the ground a lot with him. And when he's on first base, I don't care who's behind him. even if it's Judge or Soto, I know the Yankees want to play a certain casino baseball, which is, hey, we don't want someone making an out in front of Soto and Judge. We're looking for a 2 or 3 run homer. I get it, but now they dropped them to like 6th, 7th in the lineup. When he's on first base, can you stop playing the freaking stopwatch game? Well, this guy's 1-1 to the plate and the catcher's popping. There's teams putting pressure on your catchers. The Yankees have become he's the only guy who runs and he's not running. And maybe this hop run bullshit that they thought was going to work so great. He went 15 for 15 to open his career. And then like everything in the major leagues, people go to school on you and it's not been nearly as good since then. And you know, like they're crying out for like John Birdie to come back to maybe get like LeMahieu off the field and add a little more base stealing threat to their thing. But I think, I'll throw in another one, Ryan. I'm sorry, I've gone on here a little bit. When there's a runner on base and DJ LeMahieu's up, you should call a hit and run every freaking time, because he's a human double play waiting to happen. He's not. If you're going to insist on him being in the lineup, then use the one skill he clearly still has left, which is he'll probably put the bat on the ball and try to create some movement and use that to your advantage. The static nature of the Yankees, I think, again, it's lost with a kind of analytic mind thinking, which is, hey, that's not how you create runs with our lineups. Yeah, but human beings are playing, and the other team's defense never feels a second of duress when they're playing against your team. Get your freaking head out of the computer and watch the game. Like, you are putting no threat on the other team. The pitcher, go talk to a veteran pitcher. You know what they hate? Being distracted. I was literally talking to a pitcher the other day. He said, I'm telling you, I was never the same pitcher with a guy on base because A, I couldn't do my normal windup, and B, there's always the thought, especially a fast guy, he's there. I just don't want to let somebody walk. As much as they tell me, concentrate on the hitter, it's human nature. I don't want to deal with that. Well, Yankees have to start putting some offensively, some threat back in some other teams. Oswaldo Cabrera's on first base. Hit and run a little bit. Volpe's on first, run a little bit. Verdugo's on first, run a little bit. You know, just create some uncomfortable feeling in the opposing pitching and defense.
Joe, play baseball, like you said. And that's kind of where we've been with this Yankees squad for a couple of years. I mean, you look at last year, they fired their hitting coach because of complaints of approach and too much of, we're trying to play games where we want home run double, or a walk. Like, I don't care about the strikeout. I don't care about, like the approach. And there's a man on base. There's 2 outs. There's 1 out. What's the situation? They didn't care about situation. They care more about home run, walk, strikeout. Those are the 3 things that seem to be the approach.
And I think we're back there again. Don't you think we're back there again?
Where's Casey Dykes and James Rowson? I thought you hired these guys to help, and that's the approach thing I think you're talking about here with Volpe,
Dykes
right?
Was here last year, but yeah.
Dykes last year, but like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, these are the guys that you got to start asking questions like, where's the approach for these guys? And
well, I don't know, Joe, you tell me. That it's a hard age to get, like, if you're not going to steal it at least 75 or 80%, don't try. Because I think it's just an analytic model. And I think I'm not anti-analytics. It's important to know what the odds are of things. But that's macro, and it takes away the feel of a game. It is not actually in the matrix. There's not chess pieces playing these games. There's human beings.
Yep.
And when you stand around, if you hit a bunch of homers, it all feels great. But there's this thing that happens. The Yankees just went over 3 weeks without a stolen base. And when you stand around and you're losing and you're not hitting the home runs and you're not creating some dynamism in the game, there's this lethargy that comes over your team of, we're waiting for the cavemen to hit homers. And sometimes you have to be proactive, right? Like, you don't want to blitz in football, but sometimes you got to blitz, right? Sometimes you got to say, the hell with it. We're going to go to single coverage because every once in a while, if you don't hit the quarterback, I get it. We're going to put our cornerbacks in a bad situation, but sometimes you just got to say, fuck it. We got to hit the quarterback.
You're putting stress on the quarterback and the offensive line. That's ultimately what you're trying to do is against the pitchers.
Yeah. I feel like the Yankees talked a good game about playing the full game. And they've done, especially in this spring training, coming out of last year, playing the full game. And I still think they're a home run or bust team. And I understand why home run or bust has value, because the batting average league wide is 242. And it's hard to string together hits when the league is hitting 242. And even if you string together 3 singles, you score 1 run. And we saw the Yankees tied the game. Took the lead in the 9th inning against Kimbrel their way, walk, homer. But you got to kind of then have the perfect sequence. If it's homer, walk, it's not the same thing, though that would have tied the game, actually. I just think human beings play the game. And when you get into a baseball game, a tight game, you have to have other ways to put duress on the team beyond the, hey, we're 2 innings away from Soto and Judge batting again. Maybe one of them will hit a homer.
Yeah, putting duress on players like Anthony Volpe that are in the struggle right now. Maybe, hey, it's in his head, and maybe, hey, he'll boot this ground ball, and then all of a sudden we spark a rally in the 9th inning. That's what the Orioles did. And I know we're getting into the bigger topic here of the macro versus micro. I think focus on the baseball game that you're playing today. It does still feel like with the Yankees, we're back in that mode like we are in previous years of, hey, we're the Yankees. We know we're going to make the playoffs, and that's all we care about. At the end of the day, it's going to be us hitting home runs and mashing you to death. If we lose a bunch of games in June, we don't care because we get off to a hot start, and we'll carry this over into August and probably September and win enough games to get in the playoffs, and then we'll just take our chances from there. That's how it feels from an approach from a fan.
I don't think that's how it, but I mean, tactically how they play the game, that maybe it is, but I don't think that, like, there's this feeling of indifference. And I know look, I think the Yankees want to win a championship. This idea of, Hal Steinbrenner is happy with 40,000 people in the crowd and making the playoffs and things like that. They have a $300 million payroll.
Yes.
They've traded, like, if you go back for like about a 4-year period and look at the amount of farm collateral they've traded to try to win, that doesn't scream to me about a team of indifference. Like, I get it. Fans get angry. They're like, oh, fuck you. You're not like your dad. You whatever. Well, they got a $300 million payroll, and they've traded like 30 prospects in about a 36-month period. To me, that's a throw the brick on the gas pedal kind of organization. You want to say they made bad trades? Like,
yeah, I would, because the only best prospect they've traded away was Josh Smith for the Rangers. I mean, everyone else has been a bunch of no names that haven't turned into anything for prospects from the farm system the Yankees have traded away. And I can argue that the $300 million, monster that they built is a brick shithouse a little bit with 2 superstars or 3 superstars with Cole, Judge, and Soto, and the rest is.
But that's a different thing from that's bad decision making as opposed to indifference. And I think I did this last week also, Ryan, which is, at this moment, the Yankees have the 4th best record in the major leagues. The Dodgers have the 5th best record in the major leagues. I was there in Glendale in mid-February when they opened their camp. They were the Beatles. They were, hey, are they going to win 120 games? They're like a game worse than the Yankees at the break. They've won. Hey, the Yankees haven't won a World Series since 2009. The Dodgers have won 1 since 1988. It was in a COVID shortened 2020. And I think these things are hard to win. The Braves 100%. Are an incredibly well-run team. They've won 1 since 1995. They're on this run and getting to the playoffs. I think in some ways what the Yankees did from 96 to 2000 is their blessing and their curse. Their blessing is that they won 4 championships in 5 years. The curse is that people think it's easy to do because that team, which is historic and was incredibly conceived, it is not replicable. No team ever again is going to bring up 4 players at one time that are as good from day one, as Jeter, Pettit, Rivera, and Posada were, and 100%. Then play together and as well and as healthy as they did for 15 years. Just never going to happen again. No. Now, having said that, The Yankees have Soto, Judge, and Cole. Those guys should not, they might not be the core four, but those three guys are great players. And this front office needs to do better at building around. They did a great job. Aaron Judge is as good a draft pick as you're ever going to see, right? Late first round draft choice to go ahead and say, we love that possibility of him and get it. And you make a big trade for Soto, and you make one of the biggest signings in history for Cole. Good. Again, I think all of that suggests a go-for-it organization, especially since you then signed Judge for the rest of his career. The Yankees have made a lot more good trades than bad ones. As you point out, Josh Smith is like, of all the prospects they've traded, you know, the Astros traded Josh Hader, had no idea who he was, right?
Yeah.
They drafted Mark Appel over Chris Bryant. Like, Mark Appel essentially never played in the major leagues. They released J.D. Martinez. The Dodgers traded Yordan Alvarez for Josh Fields. They gave up O'Neal Cruz. Or like everyone screws up, even the best run organizations. But the Yankees have greatness at the top of their roster, and it's why I think more than anything right this second, Verdugo and Volpe were so important because and Gleyber Torres, they're smack dab in the primes of their careers. They all seem like the kind of players who should have well-rounded seasons that include offense. And their offense on all three guys has been unplugged. You know, DJ LeMahieu is an off-injured mid-30s player. Giancarlo Stanton is an off-injured mid-30s player. Anthony Rizzo is an off-injured mid-30s player. Like, at this point, those guys have had their career. These other three guys, to me, were so vital. And now, would you like to throw in Austin Wells and Ben Rice as kind of like wild card possibilities? From those five guys I just mentioned, three have to play well offensively the rest of the season, at least, to join Judge and Soto and make it feel like the Yankees could score in more innings, except for beyond the innings of Soto and Judge. Believe it or not, it's what separates the Mets and Yankees right now. It's like when I'm at a Met game, I'm like, the Mets could score in any inning. Like, their lineup feels long.
It is.
With the Yankees, it feels like, oh, the Yankees didn't score in the top of the first. I'll see everybody in the fourth inning. And that's how it feels a little bit. And to me, that's a big burden on Volpe, Verdugo, and Torres, who should be better offensively. Especially, Torres. It's a big deal because he needs to be hitting fifth and delivering something.
So I want to go to do up here because that was the three. I was going to ask you three things that you need to see out of the break, right? For this Yankees team to show. I
mentioned about 10 already, right?
And you've mentioned 10 of them already. And I think those three players right there might be the do up, right? Verdugo, Volpe, and Torres. Those are your three players that you need to see in this lineup to perform offensively in order for this team to take that next step and be the real threat that we hope they can be in the playoffs. Joel, I think for us as Yankees fans, the Gleyber Torres thing is very interesting, and I think you're hinting at it a little bit. I think he knows his days are numbered in pinstripes. So I think we've kind of dusted over, do up what the three things are. It's the lineup, it's the offense. We've really highlighted that. Torres, I think that's where it brings me to my radio irrational take here. I think as a Yankees fan, I have to now believe that DJ LeMahieu or Gleyber Torres, one of those two players is not going to be on this roster come the trade deadline this year, just because of the factors that we have discussed here, right? Like, this team, you've built Soto, you have nothing guaranteed beyond this year. Judge is in the prime of his career. Cole's in the prime of his career. You have to go for it right now at this moment. You built a $300 million payroll. Is it radio irrational for me to believe that one of those two guys is not going to be on this roster come trade deadline, just due to the fact of DJ ain't performing like he is. He's a ground ball waiting to happen. And Gleyber Torres, I just don't think he's ever going to be. Yeah.
Can I ask you this? Not on the roster because of what? They're going to be waived?
Trade.
Well, okay. Well, DJ LeMahieu's not tradable.
Well, DJ. All right. So DJ's fact, it would be right getting cut or waived, and the other one for Gleyber would be trade.
Else, he's a 10-5 guy, so he doesn't have to allow a trade to happen. And unless they're taking a worse contract back, and doesn't seem to me to be a lot of sense in that. they're not going to be probably able to trade that player. So the question is with Aaron Hicks still on their books through next year, is Hal Steinbrenner going to take another dinner on DJ LeMahieu, who's signed through not just next year, but 2026? So, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, because they might decide, man, we love this guy, but we'd be better off with a minimum wage guy playing there and just live with that. I don't think they'll do that. I think that they'll continue to try to do it. Will there be an injured list stint? Like his foot is still feeling weak. I don't know. Like that could happen. I would be surprised if he were traded. Not impossible. I mean, if there are older Yankee fans watching this, I remember they once took the bad contract of Danny Tartabull and turned it into Ruben Sierra, and they took the bad contract of Ruben Sierra and turned it into Cecil Fielder. So there's always another worse contract out there that somebody might be trying to get out of. I'm not sure that LeMahieu would okay it as a 10-5 guy. So that probably comes off. Is there a possibility of trading Gleyber Torres? I would say some, because there might be a team out there that needs offense and might feel liberated from New York, that Gleyber Torres at, 28, I think, should, and coming off of a good offensive season last year, should be better than this. And maybe his mind would be eased, since I agree with you. He wants to be a Yankee. He knows that's over now. And he's probably putting some pressure on himself. If he suddenly became a Seattle Mariner and was like, all right, well, I don't really want to be here, so I'm just going to go play, maybe a team would take a shot on it. I'm not positive that would happen. I would suspect both, and I think the Yankees have to still play the upside of Torres. They need offense, and unless you're telling me, and it's hard to find who that is, like who is the offensive player likely to get traded in the next 2 weeks? Who changes it? Would Isaac Paredes help them? Yeah, but that's Tampa Bay, and they're going to say Spencer Jones and what else, right? Yandy Diaz, would that help them? Yeah, that probably takes Ben Rice off the roster, though. He's a first baseman. What do you do, like with Judge's best friend on the team, Rizzo? Do you begin to lose Judge that way? I don't know. Like the Yankees could say, screw that. We need Yandy Diaz.
Yeah.
Again, it's Tampa Bay. They're not going to do you any favors. So it's going to be 100 cents on the dollar plus another 25 cents. I'm not
Correct
sure.
Me if I'm wrong, real quick, Joel. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard you on the show last week here. Other scouts don't view Spencer Jones as highly as the Yankees do. And in defense of, let's say the Yankees are looking in the future a little bit here with this trade deadline approaching, we want to keep Juan Soto as best as possible. So we're just going to hope that we can match whatever dollar value that is. And we have Jason Dominguez waiting in the wings. Why not trade a Spencer Jones? You have the collateral to be able to do it.
Internally, the Yankees still have high regard for Spencer Jones, who at the same age is ahead of the level Aaron Judge was at that age. He is a incredibly athletic guy for 6'6". When the ball hits his bat, it goes very far. And the Yankees aren't just going to trade that for somebody. If he's traded, it's going to be for somebody who they have some control over for a bit, who does something significant, hits clearly in the top 4 spots in their lineup, or pitches one of the first 3 games of a playoff series. And I'm not sure who that is in this marketplace.
No.
Like this trade deadline, because of all the National League teams that still think they're in it, and the fact that the bad teams are bad because they have shit on their roster, means that, like, I'm not sure what it is. Now, I'm always going to be surprised. 2 guys are going to get traded between now and 6 p.m. on July 30th, Ryan, where I'm going to go, wow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that was interesting. And can the Yankees jump out? But, like, we see the world of possibilities. I always encourage people. The Yankees, in a perfect world, would improve at third base. That feels like a real important thing to do. That even if they got league average performance at third base, that would improve their lot greatly. Go look at the universe of third basemen. The really good ones are on contenders, essentially. except for maybe Isaac Paredes, who could get traded. Ryan McMahon is not getting traded, right? I'm not even sure how good he is outside of course, but he isn't getting traded. Alex Bregman, the Astros are now fully flying and think they're going to win the World Series again. That's who that organization is. So you can't go to the third base store and just get it. And so I think so that was a long way of saying I think they still are going to be on July 1st saying we need Gleyber Torres to hit. Because that's their best way to offense, is that a guy who has hit for them hits. And maybe does clearing the trade deadline clear Torres' head a little bit? I don't know. I think they're going to roll the dice with that because the best offensive player they might be able to acquire is just getting Gleyber Torres right. Like, I'm not sure DJ LeMahieu could get right. He's 35 and off injured. Gleyber Torres is 28. They need something that approaches what he did. Forget about the 35 homer year.
No.
He was a good offensive player the last 2 years. If they get that, that's the way they outdo the Orioles. But if they don't get that, I'm not sure they could find it in the marketplace. So if the question was that, I expect that both guys will be on the roster beyond it, because I don't think Hal Steinbrenner is ready to take a dinner on DJ LeMahieu, and I'm not sure the Yankees believe that they could do better offensively than just keep trying to fix Gleyber Torres.
All right. Fair enough, Joel. Fair enough. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see how these next couple of weeks play leading up to that deadline and seeing who those surprise guys are and how the Yankees do approach it. If there's a team or two that, decides to sell off maybe a couple pieces and maybe, I don't know. We'll see. There's a couple other cleanup questions I have for you. And I really just want to hit on the Ben Rice thing again real quick. You had hit on that about Ben Rice, that he had gone through his first real major league struggle, but then you see the monster home run he hits in the ninth inning. For you, and this is the bigger question, when Rizzo does eventually make his way back to the major league roster, are you just at this point right now, I'm just going to keep seeing what Ben Rice is? I'm not ready to declare whether or not he's the everyday first baseman, or I don't know. He's earning a lot of, I think the Yankees even trust him considering they bat him so high in the lineup. They want to see him get more pitches and make those adjustments. He's pretty damn impressive, Joel.
Yeah, so I think this falls into the category of when I was doing this for when Garrett Cole comes back, they're not really going to take Luis Gil out of the rotation. And I just kept saying the same thing. When Garrett Cole comes back, these five guys will all not be in the rotation, and Clark Schmidt got hurt, right? So the Yankees dream, and every team dreams about the day where all their players are healthy and they have to make tough decisions. So, let's see Anthony Rizzo get healthy. That's still a minimum of a month from now, right? He's doing nothing on the field yet. He's a month away under the best circumstances. That's another 100 or so plate appearances for Ben Rice. And he looks like he's going to play every day, pretty much. Maybe a tough lefty. They sit him and put LeMahieu at first, but they might have even reached a point where he's playing against everything. So he's going to get about a minimum of 100 plate appearances. Again, if he doesn't get hurt, if he doesn't have an 0 for 25 with 18 strikeouts where they're like, I guess we got to send him back to AAA now. So I always caution that we're going to get so much new information before the Yankees have to make that choice. Hey, I know, do this, Yankee fans. Aaron Judge gets hurt. Well, suddenly, you can maneuver around and the DH is open. And it's just, don't make a decision until you have to make a decision, both in life and baseball. Use the time you have. Whatever decision, don't be impetuous and irrational in life and in baseball. Make the decision when you have to make it. The Yankees don't have to make an Anthony Rizzo, Ben Rice decision on July 16th. They might have to make it on August 16th. Man, that's a lot of games, a lot of plate appearance, and a lot of news from now. And we'll see where we are. By the way, in the next 2 weeks, the Yankees might trade for Yandy Diaz. That would be a different decision, because if they trade for Yandy Diaz, that means Anthony Rizzo ain't playing first base when he comes back.
That's for sure.
Right? That would be we wouldn't be talking about Ben Rice then. So we have so much new information that's going to come in. I know that fucks with talk radio and what we're doing, where I just don't go, no, Anthony Rizzo's done. If he ever plays another game, the Yankees aren't trying.
No.
We're going to get a month of information.
Yeah. I think it's more just me elaborating to the player Ben Rice is becoming before, we saw a little bit of in AAA. We heard, Ben Rice is putting an impressive season together at AAA. And then they call him up, after Rizzo gets hurt. And then you're like,
couldn't have been more impressive in the minor leagues than Nick Johnson. And came up and he was really good. And then he couldn't stay healthy, basically. And Greg Bird was really an impressive guy. And like Major League Baseball's hard, man.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay consistently good. Like look at the problems. Volpe is a talented, diligent guy. And it's hard to be good at Major League Baseball. The league is already adjusting to Ben Rice, learning what he can hit. He's going to have to make adjustments back. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders. He has two things that are hard, that are overt. And now the question is, does he make a career out of the two things? He has a real feel for the strike zone, and the ball really comes off his bat when he squares it up. I mean, I would say he has those things, right? He has those things. He also has holes. The league is beginning to find and expose those holes, and he seems like a smart kid.
Yes.
So now will he be able to do what Anthony Volpe really hasn't been able to? Make a quick adjustment. Oh, they're starting to give me heat up in the zone, and I'm not laying off of it. What do I do about that? And can he adjust? Because the league adjusts faster than ever before. Because of the analytics, there's no guessing by the scout behind the plate. Well, it seems to me he's not getting to the curveball. No. Here's the last 30 curveballs thrown to Ben Rice. This is the result. So they know quickly what he can and can't do, and we'll see. But control of the strike zone, which means control of the count, is the most important cornerstone of hitting. And I think Ben Rice has control of the strike zone. And I think that gives him a shot to do something.
Yep, that's all I wanted to hear, Joel. And that's a good breakdown of Ben Rice as a player. I want to bring in Tommy for Hogue Analytics, and I also want to ask this question because I think Tommy's getting a little antsy over here, and I want to make sure he gets in this discussion. Tommy, what's going on, man?
What's up, guys? How are we doing?
Good. So listen, I want to ask Joel this real quick. This past two series, the bullpen had looked pretty good also, and we hadn't really discussed that a little bit. The guys of Hill, Cousins, these guys they're starting to perform pretty well for this bullpen. And I wanted to ask you, Joel, do you think, I'm not saying I think the Yankees still want to address the bullpen at the deadline, but is it a little bit of a relief that, hey, maybe we have something in one or two of these guys and maybe we can develop them into some kind of impact reliever, because we're still waiting for the likes of Efros, Trevino, and even when Clark Schmidt comes back, because Luis Gil dominated his last two outings, and now you start to question, all right, maybe he's a really good rotation piece. I know that's a lot there, Joel, but the bullpen real quick, I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on that lately?
Was that a pun when you said, was this a relief? Anyway, yeah, look, I think even the greatest detractor of the Yankees would say the one thing that they've been spectacular at for about the last 5 or 6 seasons is maximizing, finding the kind of relievers, whether it's pitch design, shape, velocity, movement, whatever it is they like in their models. They find relievers they like, and they really maximize it. I mean, Wandy Peralta could thank his 4-year contract on the Yankees. They pulled, Clay Holmes going to make a lot of money this offseason. He was not really anything with Pittsburgh. Ian Hamilton was, the Yankees are like experts at finding people who the White Sox, who apparently don't know what they're doing, like Ian Hamilton, Jake Cousins, Tim Hill, like getting something out of guys. They are really good at it. Having said that, they're going to try very hard to add 2 relievers to this situation. I would say I don't know anything, but I'm a very kind of atmospheric reporter. I really listen to what people say and how they say it, because people are telling you things all the time. The way the Yankees have talked about Scott Efros for the last month, that hasn't sounded like an organization that's like, man, we can't wait for Scott Efros to be back. And by the way, they sent him to AAA when his rehab was up. They didn't bring him up. I never heard enthusiasm about his rehab. So I'm wondering, has he lost something with some surgeries? Or, like, I don't know what's going on. I just haven't heard it. I keep listening for words that I don't hear. And nobody out and out said, well, whatever. But there's been no enthusiasm there. So, whatever. Trevino is, who knows when that is. Like, if either of those guys come back, great. They know that they're dealing with less stuff. By the way, Michael Tonkin, who couldn't get a guy out with the Mets earlier in the season, has given them a lot.
Yep.
Obviously, Luke Weaver's another guy, couldn't hit with a bunch of teams, but had stuff, and they've done it. Having said that, I think they're going to try to find at least one and maybe two relievers. I think they'd really love to find somebody who can either who sets up Holmes and or replaces Holmes or works as Holmes' security blanket, because Holmes has been a very good reliever since he showed up with the Yankees. But what's been removed with him for a while now is there were times he was really efficient and clean. He'd get through a 1-2-3 inning with some dominance, like 2 ground balls and a strikeout, and be done in 12 pitches. He is becoming a top step relief pitcher, which is, even when he gets through it, like he should have gotten through it the other day, and it becomes a Verdugo Volpe thing, but he walked 2 guys. Like, the other thing is a ground ball single. That's going to happen with Holmes, ball in the ring, but he's walked 2 guys into a bases loaded situation. That being said, Hunter Harvey just got traded from Washington to Kansas City. Kansas City paid a big price for that. They gave up the significant prospect, and they gave up the 39th pick in the draft for that, for Hunter Harvey, who has control through next year. So the price has been established for a good reliever. I think the Yankees really needed the Texas Rangers to get swept by the Astros, because if the Texas Rangers get swept by the Astros over the weekend, I think they might have gone into sell mode. They won the series, and they have 3 former closers on their team, and Kirby Yates, David Robinson, and Jose Leclerc, who are all free agents at the end of the season. And now Texas, who doesn't really want to sell, might have a reason not to do that. So, like that's how sensitive the trade market is now. We're talking about a weekend series against the Astros, and they won the series, the defending champions. And I don't think, so the Yankees need more teams in the marketplace, and I think they want to find some relief help, because this still feels very much like they're getting results from it, but these are more fringy guys, and they need better than fringy. And look, if they don't do it and Clark Schmidt comes back, how much can they build up Clark Schmidt? Does he end up in the bullpen because they can't kind of get all the way back to filling him up and he's worked out of the bullpen? Or can they build him up and they could put Heel in the bullpen, who clearly could probably work late in the game? Does Ian Hamilton come back from injury and give them something? It feels like I don't ever remember Brian Cashman thinking he had a very good team at this time of year, and I think he thinks he has a very good team at this time of year. I can't remember where he didn't address the areas that needed to be addressed.
Fair enough. Tommy, let's get into Hogue Analytics.
Yeah, so going into Sunday, I was really interested, one, to see if the Yankees would sweep and go into the All-Star break in first after a horrible month, but also was interested to see if Carlos Rodon was going to make the adjustments that he said he was going to make right after his last start. He gives up 4 runs before even recording an out against Tampa, and after that start, he said he was going to change his pitch mix. He said he was going to stop throwing the fastball so early in games that was just getting crushed in the first inning. You saw it against Toronto, and then saw it against Tampa. He threw his first 8 pitches were all breaking balls. He didn't throw his first fastball until the 12th pitch of the game. That's unlike Carlos Rodon. It's unlike a lot of pitchers in baseball that just throw the fastball. Maybe the first time around a lineup, they're throwing only fastballs. So he ended up throwing 40 sliders in his start against Baltimore. It was the first time, or it was the most sliders he had thrown this season in a start, in most going back to August 27th of last season. I know the stat line wasn't great, Joel. Only 4 innings, over 100 pitches, but he really only made that one mistake to Henderson that cost them. Did you see an adjustment in Carlos Rodon's last start that gives you encouragement going forward, or was it nothing for you?
So, Tommy, I think the answer to that is, again, an answer about the current state of pitching in the major leagues, which is we're teaching an entire generation how to think about stuff and maximizing stuff, but not manage a baseball game. There's the the craft of a starting pitcher in particular used to be two things: stuff and guile, because it was important to try to get through 7, 8, or 9 innings. Now we tell guys, here's how you maximize each pitch. And Carlos Rodon is very much, to me, feels like a guy who it was why I thought the contract, there were many reasons I thought, I am on record, in print, the day they signed him, I hate this contract, right? Kind of thing. And there were a lot of reasons for it. But one of them is he's a 2-pitch pitcher who you're signing for 6 years, which means he's going to have to evolve. I'll take my chances that Garrett Cole will evolve because he is such a thoughtful. Now, this might be unfair. Garrett Cole's probably heading to Cooperstown, but he's a thoughtful pitcher besides everything else. He knows how to, what's my stuff this day? How do I adjust with the stuff? What's the hitter's strength? I think Carlos Rodon is George Foreman. Like, I'm going to hit you as hard as you can. I can. Oh, you didn't go down. It's the great thing from his fight with Ali, which was Ali at some point says to him in about the 4th or 5th round, literally whispers in his ear, is that all you got? And Foreman later says into his own head, yeah, that's it. That's all I got. And kind of like at that point knows, like there wasn't art to what Foreman did as a boxer. There was brutality to what he did. And by the way, he did it at the top of the field. And for a while, when Rodon is right, his brutality works. But there's very little craft. And now we're telling that guy kind of pretty significantly into his career, hey, man, how about a little craft? But it's all the pitcher. I think it's a problem throughout the sport, Tommy. I know talking to Clark Schmidt last year, who I really like, I said, Clark, anyone ever talk to you in the minor leagues about endurance in a game? Not just maximize, and it was no. Like, all they talked to me about was, oh man, like, and I think it's a bad thing for the health of arms and for the health of the game. You throw a pitch, then you look at the Rapsodo. Oh, that was 2,700 rotations. What if you put your finger here? Like the maximizing of each pitch instead of the deep breath. Hey man, my starter went 1 inning yesterday. We used our whole bullpen. We're using an opener tomorrow. The most important thing I could do today is get 21 outs. I got to get 21 outs. How do I do that? Got to throw some sinkers, man. Get some 1-2 pitch ground balls. Nope. My job is to miss bats. That's how I got promoted. That's how I get paid. Fuck this individual game. But you're playing on a team. It's not fuck this individual game. And that's a long way of saying, can you teach this old dog a new trick? Can you teach Carlos Rodon how to think on the mound? Clearly he doesn't. It isn't something like, we talked about the fact that Volpe doesn't adjust quickly. Rodon doesn't manage games well. There's a lot of, like, this that first inning where it's like, okay, you gave up a run. There's still, your team's going to bat 8 or 9 times. You got Judge and Soto. You're 1 swing away from, why is it suddenly a 4-run inning, man? Take a deep breath and get through the inning. There's too much of that. And when I see that, that's a guy who isn't managing a game well. And I come from, and like when I think about the guys who are masters at managing games, Jimmy Key, Orlando Hernandez, what's my stuff that day? How many runs do we have? What's our bullpen situation? Like, there's a context to a game that you have. Who's the opposing starter? Right? Who's the opposing starter? Like, oh, it's Corbin Burns. Runner on third. I've got to go after this guy to get a strikeout because we're not going to score a lot of runs against Corbin Burns. How about against Dean Kremer? Like, context matters in a game. Like, and I feel that Carlos Rodon is a context-free kind of starting pitcher. It's like I either have it or I don't. And trying to teach him craft, I don't like the contract. I knew I was going to have to teach him craft without any signs that he would be a crafty starting pitcher. He's never going to be a crafty lefty. He's never going to be, Frank Tanana, Jimmy Key, crafty lefty, guy who's lost. Frank Tanana was Carlos Rodon early in his career. He was then had some surgeries and then stuck around for 15, 20 years doing something else because he had the ability. Have you seen that? Have you seen art?
No, but if this was the
Carlos
first,
Rodon?
if this was the first start and maybe transitioning into that sort of pitcher against who you think is the best competitor
But
to you,
Tommy,
in the
my argument on that, Tommy, would be, I could tell somebody to throw a bunch of sliders, and he will throw a bunch of sliders. But if he doesn't understand the meaning and the context of doing it, he's just following a blueprint as opposed to thinking well on the mound. Like Garrett Cole thinks well on the mound. I think Marcus Stroman thinks well on the mound. What's my stuff today? Now, he has a lot less stuff than Carlos Rodon. He's having a much better career than Carlos Rodon, like lengthwise and more good seasons kind of thing, because I think there's some art to the brutality. I think it's going to be very hard. I think he's following like the game plan where the quarterback gets the first 20 plays, and then it's play 21, and the defense is in a certain look, and you don't have the script anymore, and you go to the line, and the play that was called from the sideline is not a slider play. You got to do something else. Like if you tell Carlos Rodon slider, he's going to throw a slider. He's like, oh, did you notice the hitter moved up in the box? Did you read the last swing? What are you doing? Where are you trying to put that slider? There's a slider you want to throw for a strike. There's a slider you want to throw on the back foot. Like that was a day when you think about it, when you're closing the first half, you could decide to have a brutality day. You have your whole bullpen.
Yep.
Right? Because you're about to have 4 or 5 days off. Like, context matters. It's Hogan analytics. We've got all the analytics. What we are lacking is context for the analytics. What we're lacking is you are playing the game. Can you think and play? Can you chew gum and walk at the same time? I know Carlos Rodon has stuff. Does he have craft? Or is he just following hey, throw more sliders because the fastball isn't working? What kind of sliders? How often? To which hitter? I don't know that that's an easy transition for him. It's not how he became the third pick in the draft. It's not how he got the $162 million. He got that by being George Foreman.
All right. Tommy, thank you so much for Hogan Analytics, man. We appreciate you as always.
No problem.
All right, Joel, we covered a lot today. You came out hot and heavy. You're giving us a lot of football analysis today, which is I'm always a fan of because I am a diehard football fan as well.
I'm supposed to do basketball, man.
I know you're a basketball guy too, which is surprising. You're not drawing the basketball. Maybe we'll get comparisons next week about basketball. But for Joel's notebook, I did ask you if you had any memorable stories about the All-Star game. I know it doesn't have the same lore it did in the past, and it's not the same game that we grew up watching as an All-Star game and fans of baseball. But is there anything that comes to mind when it comes to the All-Star game when you think about your time covering it, maybe even watching it, and what you think about this week?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of All-Star memories. My first one that I covered one for UPI, the one where Terry Steinbeck, the A's catcher, was the MVP. I think the game might have been I'm trying to remember, was it in Cincinnati? I don't remember where it was. So I covered one for UPI, and then my first year at the Post was 89. I covered it. That's the Bo Jackson hitting the home run leading off against Rick Russell that went about 2,030 feet. And it was like, wow, Bo Jackson. I mean, I'll tell you a personal embarrassing story leading into that All-Star game. So, Nolan Ryan was deep in his career. It was a good journalism lesson to learn. I was young, very young. My first year on the beat. probably too overeager and aggressive. And I always felt like, hey, when you're in the scrum, you need to ask a question, and you don't. You need to ask a question when you have something valuable to ask, and or you need a response on a certain issue. But just doing attendance questioning, oh, I'm there, everyone needs to hear my voice because I'm such a special little boy, isn't valuable. You should use your questions and your words as wisely as possible. And Nolan Ryan, very late in his career, was named to the American League All-Star team. And we were standing with Don Mattingly. And I was like, okay, I'm going to ask a question. And I couldn't think what to ask. And I said, are you excited to hit against Ryan in the All-Star game? Of course, there was no interleague play then, but there didn't need to be interleague play. Ryan played for the Rangers. Mattingly played for the Yankees. They played against each other all the time. He hit against Ryan all the time. What the fuck was I asking that question for? It was like Mattingly, who was really for a super, people don't with history forget that how Derek Jeter, Shohei Ohtani, big he was in New York. Like for that level of player, he was incredibly accessible and incredibly kind. Like he was good with reporters. He was interesting. And that was a time of a lot more access. And he kind of let me down. He gave me a look, and then he kind of let me down easy by reminding me that he had hit quite a lot against Nolan Ryan in his career. And I was like, yeah, I'm an idiot. Lesson learned about I don't need to do attendance questioning. If they're like water in a canteen in the desert. Sip when you should, not just for the hell of it. Yeah, it was a lesson learned, but it was leading up to that first All-Star game I've ever covered.
And now you're dishing out journalism.
I was in the ballpark when Josh Hamilton went off in the home run derby.
Oh,
that was memorable. Where he did that. That was at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And and look, there were ones where like maybe the game didn't do it, but I remember like the anticipation of Matt Harvey starting at Citi Field. Like that game, just like the lead up to that. Again, I think it will be lost to time because Harvey's career didn't turn out how it looked like it might. But at that moment, who he was and what a star he might become and how great it felt. Like you're in New York, he's the big star in New York. And like oftentimes the All-Star game is a lot about anticipation. I think it's where we open. Paul Skeens is kind of a big or the big story in baseball right now. And I'm probably about 9 hours away from seeing him throw a pitch as we're doing this against the top of the American League lineup. I hope the reality meets the anticipation of that. I hope that those are, and I do hope that somebody gets on so that we have a Judge Skeens moment in the first inning. Soto promised to get on to make sure that Judge bats at least. So it's on Quan, Henderson, and Soto to have a really kind of like Judge, throw Ohtani on the American League team, let him bat. Also put him back on the Angels for a day so that both Ohtani and Judge get to bat against Skeens in the first. So we have a great moment. But it feels like the All-Star game is often like a great anticipation moment. And so when Hamilton meets the moment in the home run derby, that's kind of like when anticipation and reality merge, it's kind of like cool.
Yeah, I know we're all looking forward to seeing how Skeens attacks that top of the AL lineup, and I know you are as well. Joel, you're giving us journalism tips, you're giving us football analysis, you're giving us Volpe adjustments, you're giving us everything today, and I cannot thank you enough for just doing the show with us as always and breaking down Yankees baseball for us. We're looking forward to seeing how this team responds coming out of the All-Star break, and we're going to be looking forward to talking more with you as we head towards the second half of the season of the trade deadline, man. As always, thank you so much, Joel.
Maybe as I run out of cool stories from the last 40 years, I could start doing journalism tips at the end of the show each week.
I'm in for it. Help all the young journalists out there. Joel, you're the man. Thank you so much.
All the best, Ryan.
Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post. My name is Ryan Sampson, but he is the star of the show, Joel Sherman. Today is Monday, July 22nd. The Yankees split the first series out of the All-Star break against the Tampa Bay Rays. They win today in 9-1 fashion. Juan Soto, multiple home runs today. But I got to start off by saying and welcoming Joel. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Busy day today. Television, had to write my online column, but I don't know what you're hitting me with. I know you've got a plan, so I'm going to follow you. I'll follow you to the center of the sun, Ryan Sampson. You just go, baby.
I'm honored that you even said that right then and there. But to be frank right with you, Joel, is that I am pumped up that you are willing to make yourself available to talk right after the series is end and fresh so we can actually get your first thoughts here. So I want to start off with the first pitch, right? So the Yankees, they split this series against the Rays. They win the series against the Orioles heading into the All-Star break. And this is, for them, the Yankees have only won one series out of the last 9, Joel. And I think there's a couple of quotes here I want to ask you about from Aaron Boone and Marcus Stroman specifically over this weekend. I don't know if you heard them. Boone says after he gets ejected, I think it was on Saturday, I think we're putting better at bats together. I think, the team's getting close. We're there. We're there. We just can't get that big hit. Stroman, after he struggles yesterday, says, it's been a rough patch. I mean, I wouldn't call it a rough patch. It's been over a quarter of the season that this team has just been below 500 playing baseball wise. He says we're close and we just got to get through it and trust in our process. Aaron Judge says similar things yesterday. Teams go through slumps. We just got to change what we have to do. If we're not getting the results we're getting, change our approach and we trust that we can win some ball games. So that's the ultimate question here, Joel, is that this team, this Yankee squad that you're watching after winning the series against the Orioles and splitting this one against the Rays, is this team closer to what they're saying? They're close. They're on their way, turning this thing around, or is that still on hold for this Yankee squad?
Yeah, I don't love the prediction game, as you know, so I don't really know the answer to it. I'll say this broadly. I don't trust Aaron Boone as a trustworthy narrator of the Yankee situation. If they were in the middle of a 40-game losing streak, he'd still find the silver lining in it. It's the way he does business. I respect it. He's not going to ever disenchant his clubhouse with negative talk, but whatever he says is irrelevant to certainly how I feel and probably reality in general. So it doesn't really matter. I do think for the opening innings of the game on Sunday that they lost, they had very good at bats and then 2 horrible outcomes in double play grounders hit by Wells and Soto, especially Soto. He's up 3-0 in the count. You've got to give him the green light if he wants it, even with Judge behind it. He's such a great hitter. And then they kind of like the air felt like it was taken out of them a little by not capitalizing, which again always leads me to the Yankees psychology if they're tough enough for stuff. Big picture, everything is big picture with them. They're built to win a championship. That's the standard they're held to. If I were looking for a silver lining today in the game where they split the series, it will, of course, be somewhat memorable that Juan Soto took over late and hit 2 homers. But that was icing on top. They were in control of the game. And John Heyman and I did our podcast earlier today with Ron Darling. And one of the things I said to John is the Yankees have to do things at the trade deadline. They got to get a reliever or 2. They've got to get another bat, probably one that plays third base if there's such an animal out there. But certainly they need one more bat. Having said that, I think they could do that. If some of the guys on this team do not play better, who are not named Soto, Judge, and Cole, they are not going to win at the level they want to win at. And so today, when Austin Wells continues to have good at-bats, which began late in the first half and carried over into the second half, and his responsibility has grown with Trevino out. I will say I'm not one of these try to never be a told you so guy, but I was on when Stanton
Absolutely.
is out and his at-bats are so good, when he's not catching, he should DH. Well, we're seeing he's catching every day now and the at-bats are good. I think he's one of those guys who has spent his whole life playing every day. And when he was doing 2 on, 2 off, 1 on, 1 off, that kind of thing, he couldn't get into a groove. I do think he's a pretty good hitter. And that's positive. Volpe's at-bats second half early have been much better. LeMahieu finally got a ball out of the ballpark today. Above all else, Carlos Rodon pitched very, very well. At its heart, the first 70 games of the season, The Yankees pretty much got a good start every game of the season, right? They had that amazing streak where for about 70 games, they got no fewer than 5 innings.
Right.
So they never overexposed their bullpen. And all 5 members of the group helped create a hole that was kind of Garrett Cole in total. It was like a 2.28 ERA for 5 guys. Can they get back to maybe not 2.8? How about 3.8 for the whole group? And consistently get 15 to 21 outs and not overexpose the bullpen. Ryan, they got to do things in the next 8 days. But the most important thing they've got to get is they've invested a lot in the guys on the current roster. And a percentage of those, especially prime age guys, Rodon, Gleyber Torres, Volpe, Wells, Verdugo, they have to play more consistent besides better. The inconsistency, the length of the slumps when they slump, these guys feels beyond the standard for a good players on a good team. And so the Yankees in some way have to trade for the players they believe they have for them to be good.
And that's ultimately where I guess I'm getting at here, Joel, is the signs and the at-bats that you mentioned today, specifically with Wells and Volpe in the second half to start already. You know, the stats are not good, Joel, when you look at the rest of this lineup, Sands, Judge, and Soto, right? I mean, the league-wide OPS is 709, and everyone else besides Judge and Soto is batting well below 700 in OPS. So that's an indictment on Cashman and company for where they built this roster. I think the question there is in the underlining is like, is this a matter of the Yankees are kind of just going to go into that mindset of we're going to trust Verdugo, we're going to trust Gleyber to somehow get out of this funk, and Verdugo to get out of this funk, and Volpe to play better? Is that ultimately what we're looking at from what we've seen in this first series in the second half? And do you feel like that's the way they're gearing this up towards? Is like, this is what we got.
I would have a question for you. What's the alternative?
Well, that's kind of where I would go with do up here is talking about the trade deadline. You go
but even at
aggressive?
the trade deadline, you're not going to trade for 14 guys.
No,
right?
No.
Like the most likely outcome of the trade deadline is a bat, a reliever or two, and potentially like a swingman starter. Can it get better? I'll say this: if they traded for Vlad Guerrero Jr., they would still need other guys to play well. Right? Like, so they go from a 2-man lineup to a 3-man lineup, and that's not going to be enough. They need these other guys, even if they knock it out of the park in the next 8 days. It's very hard to win. This isn't basketball. You can't just say we're going to throw the ball to the same 2 or 3 guys every time, and that's how we're going to get to 104 points and win a game. Like, you need other guys to play well, to be good overall players. Verdugo has stopped being a good baseball player to the point where I think they've got to ask a question seriously if they should just play Grisham in center, Judge in left, and go forward like that, because at least they don't lose any defense that way. Grisham's at bats for the last 5 weeks have been better than Verdugo's for the last 5 weeks. So I would ask that question as much as anything else about,
wow.
You're trying to just improve. But again, this is moving deck chairs around the Titanic. They've had Soto and Judge hitting 2-3. Think about how many manifestations of 1 and 4 we've had. Besides 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Right.
Right. And Ryan, I actually don't mean to make light of it in any ways. I'm actually thinking about this seriously. Like, I think it was last week's show. It could have been the week before show, where you were like, well, what happens when Rizzo comes back?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ben Rice is now like 4 for 100 with 50 strikeouts. Like in his, you know what I mean? It's like the world changes a lot. But Ben Rice isn't supposed to be on the team or someone they're leaning on right now. These other guys are.
Fair enough.
And if they're going to probably get Stanton back in the next week, I wonder if they ambush the Mets and he shows up tomorrow and plays, or in the next few days, because they've been very squirrely. I mean, very Yankee. No, I mean, very squirrely about how they handled information about everything, but including this. So perhaps there's just going to be a moment where Stanton, who doesn't seem to want to go on a rehab, just wants to hit off the high-speed machine, just wants to show up and play in the lineup. And we know he at least brings presence, if nothing else. I just want to add one other thing about why I mentioned Stanton there. The Yankees have not been a good total offense. Their work against left-handers in particular has been pathetic. And the Mets are starting Quintana and Minaya the next 2 days. And I don't think it's an accident how the Mets set things up. As we remember, they kind of got David Peterson in the last time instead of Severino. They kept Severino out of this one, and Severino's kind of been their best starter for the totality of the year. The Yankees have to do better against lefties. That means, besides Soto and Judge, who are just great against lefties also. So Stanton did okay, but not great against lefties. He needs to be closer to above average or better. Volpe has not hit lefties. He needs to hit lefties. And look, one of the good things about the lineup this year is they had some left-handed diversity, and they, but like Verdugo hasn't hit lefties. Wells has been okay, but not great. Like they're susceptible in a way. And, I include this guy's name in my column tomorrow as just a name. I know the aggregator Fox will jump out on it, but just a name. Like Ahmad Rosario is a positional depth player, but he has one great skill. He can really hit lefty pitching. And he's a free agent on a team in sell mode. He'll probably move. He's actually the kind of guy, because he has a little athleticism and flexibility positionally, who could help them. If not him, someone like him. Because, again, like LeMahieu, he needs to have a 750 OPS against lefty pitching or better. It's pathetic. It's across the board, and they're just too susceptible. And the games, as you know, today, it's why I pointed out today was different. There's so many games, Ryan, when you're watching it, you go, oh, Judge and Soto are up. This is an inning they'll score or could score. Then they don't, and you go, I'll see you in an hour.
Yeah, I know.
They come up again because they have no shot, and they're easy outs. And that it's why I say they can't replace 7 position players. So some of these other people have to perform well. And to some degree, historically now, they're good with relief pitching. Mm-hmm. Well, you're seeing some of these guys are performing much better for the Yankees than they did in other places. The Tompkins, the Hills, the Jake Cousins, etc. Why do the hitters not improve? They've gotten bullpen down, and I get it. Hitting is historically tougher than ever before. But this bad for this many guys, for this extent, when they go in the shitter, they really go in the shitter.
Right. And I think that's why I was asking ultimately to start off, the Stroman quote, the Boone quote. I know you're saying he'll paint lipstick on a pig, right? As Michael Kay likes to say, that's how Boone will always look at it. But for your eye, for what you're seeing, and I hope I'm reading this right, you're taking some silver lining in what Volpe has done so far in these first 4 games. Maybe they can somehow jumpstart Verdugo. I don't know. LeMahieu, do you take a positive, the fact that he hit a home run today after getting benched? How do you feel about those type of players that you mentioned here? Those are the guys that have to come out of these slumps and just be an average baseball player for this lineup.
Yeah, I take very little out of it because, again, I don't forget how long the season is, and I tend not to forget previous shows we've done. And I think if we went back to some of our first shows, early shows, one of the things we talked about a lot is the sense that the lineup was more diverse and longer. Right. Those early days when Volpe was hitting and suddenly it's all lead him off. And Verdugo was hitting well enough that they actually put him into cleanup. And there was good. Oswaldo Cabrera hit well for the first 3 weeks of the season. And so this isn't about temporary. Mm-hmm. But I'll go back to this. It is not ancient history. Gleyber Torres and DJ LeMahieu had 800 OPSs in the second half of last season. Not 1905, not 1995, 2023 in the second half. Now, is it possible in that 1 year period, DJ LeMahieu completely got used up and Gleyber Torres kind of mentally fell out because in his walk year? Well, probably that's what we've seen for about 65% of the season. But nothing feels impossible to me, especially about Glaber, who's in the middle of his career and I know is a better hitter than this. I know he's a better hitter. And so does it show up over the last 50 games? I think I said this last week. I'll say it again because I do think it has value. In the midst of the great Yankee run of the late 90s and early 2000s, Paul O'Neill once said to me, you know, when you win a championship, everyone on the team had a good year. And his point was there'll be a guy who hit 204, but we'll remember the 2 games he helped win, or the key defensive play, or the key base running, or when he filled in for an injured guy for a week so valuably. And so there is still that possibility. The Yankees are like in an interesting place. They're after this afternoon, I think they're a game and a half out of first place, and yet 4.5 games out of the playoffs. Like they could fall like an Aaron Judge injury or Garrett Cole injury, something like that, can really put them in peril. I expect them to make the playoffs in a 6 playoff team field in the American League, but they're not clear and loose right now. Therefore, DJ LeMahieu could have 2 good months and have a very meaningful impact on the 2024 season. Gleyber Torres can do it. Anthony Volpe can do it. We know who the heavy weightlifters are. They need a chorus to be better than the core, to be better, and I think as important, Ryan, more consistent with shorter slump periods than we've seen to date.
I hear you, Joel, and I think Yankees fans are hoping to see it. The consistency is what we're asking for, and just average baseball play. Being an average baseball player, get to 700 OPS at least. Get there, be consistent, and get out of this funk that they've been in for over 2 months now. And it's the sample size is large enough there where you start to ask yourself, where the hell is this Yankees team and where are we going, right? Because this is the crunch time. This is the final stretch, right? Like this is the stretch run we're about to hit in August, and the trade deadline's here. So you're either going to make your adjustments and say this is the squad we're rolling with, or I don't know, Joel. And I think that's what we're going to get to here and do up. All right. So I want to talk about trade deadline needs. And you know, Tommy's throwing infielders at me. I could ask you about those. I could ask you about where you think is most important for this team to address. And I think a key question here that and I give Hogan credit for this one. Has the infield turned into a more critical need to address at the trade deadline than the bullpen has, to your point, where they've gotten some really good performances from the Hill, the Cousins, and the Michael Tonkins of the world?
So I think historically when the Yankees have a good team, and I think they have a good team, I think it's better than what we've seen over 30 games. You know, I would point out, like, you know, going into the second half, the Dodgers have been about a 500 team for about 50 games. And we think they're very good. The the Braves are under 500 for the last 59 games. I looked at it today. They're 28 and 31. We think of that as a very good team. Like there are long stretches. I think the Yankees are very good, but that's not the standard they want to play to. They tell us every year they're playing for a championship. Not my words. They always get mad at the people who just repeat what. Well, you told me it's like championship or bust. That's the standard I'm holding you to. So they need to get better. In that realm, when Brian Cashman has had that kind of team, he has worked very hard at the deadline to add personnel to it, often in multiple buckets. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that he'll add in multiple buckets at least a bat. And like I think the under-over would be a bat and a reliever. And I would bet the over that a second reliever or a second bat or both show up, or a swingman starter to begin to maybe put Hill in the bullpen. Like if you found a swingman starter, and that way you kind of like work in both elements. I just think that's who he's been. He has as opposed to most executives, he has a very long track record. And I think there's another pressure point. They just can't expect Cole and Judge to have great years forever. A lot of that has now gone unfulfilled, at least championship-wise, while they've had both of these guys who have won MVPs, Cy Youngs, and they have not fulfilled the greatest hopes of this. Hell, Cole won the Cy Young last year. They didn't make the playoffs, okay? This is the only year for sure they know they have Juan Soto, who I think everyone who watches him now goes, this might be the best hitter I've ever seen, right? He's going to be on your short list, especially for 25 and under. So they have these three giants of the game. They only know they have them at this level and in Soto underemployment this year. You can't play the I hope Spencer Jones is a good player someday game. Now, if you truly believe in your heart that Spencer Jones is on an Aaron Jones trajectory and you need to take him off the chessboard, fine. If you believe that about Jason Dominguez, fine. But at some point, you got to say one or two. And in this kind of season, everyone else is available for the right kind of player. Now, will that player become available? And who is that player? Like, if Vlad Guerrero Jr. is available, I'm not sure he's going to be. The Blue Jays say they want to try to win next year, which I think is delusional of that organization. He is a free agent after next year. But if they hold on, like if they decide to put him in the marketplace, first of all, I think whatever the Yankees should offer, the Mariners should offer more, right? Like whatever it is. Like the Mariners, there's 30 teams in the major leagues. 29 have played in the World Series, and then there's the Mariners, right? The Mariners have made the playoffs once since 2001. That is a team that needs to stop talking about like the future for sure and go for it. But like, what is your Vladimir Guerrero play? How much we just saw over the weekend, the Yankees really unplugged Isaac Paredes, who had been hitting great. Suddenly he's in a slump. Is he a guy you think is actually a well above average hitter as he's been the last 2 years? He's got a lot of control in front of him.
Yeah. And he's also position versatility on Paredes too.
And most importantly for them, third base.
Right. Exactly.
For this. Like, what are you willing to give up? I know people will say, well, it's in the division. Toronto and Tampa Bay and the Yankees made a trade just before the season, right? Ben Roethlisberger went to Tampa Bay, and the trade that brought John Birdie to New York. So I think it could be done. I think Brian Cashman has historically, since his control period, which starts about 2005, 2006, where he really gains a lot of control, has been very, very protective of his farm system. The farm system has never turned out in the major leagues to be as good as the protective level of the group. He has generally traded and not been hurt. Like, he now is feeling a little pain. If they had Josh Smith would be the starting third baseman. But every team, like, I see people now like killing Brian for that. And it's just like, understand, if you're at the top of the sport making trades and the worst you do in 25 years is Josh Smith, you've done a freaking unbelievable job, right? Like if at some point you're going to trade somebody where there's pain. But I think they have to really limit the number of prospects they say are off limits. Off limits. Yeah. I think pretty much everyone. And by the way, I think even Spencer Jones and Jason Dominguez I can't imagine who the player is unless you want Guerrero so bad. But like, if there is a tremendous difference-making player, is that Mason Miller? That's a very dangerous trade for me. Mason Miller averages 100 miles per hour. It feels like he could pitch 2 innings for you and then not pitch in 2 years after Tommy John surgery. As attractive as that might be, is it Garrett Crochet, who probably could go again, like feels like go into your rotation now, dominate your bullpen?
It's Luis Hill 2.0. That's what that Garrett Crochet feels like,
Yeah, but like he's had a lot of injuries these last few years. So it's about a bat to me. If you could get a controllable bat, and if you believe in your heart that you're going to sign Juan Soto long-term, no matter what, an outfielder prospect, as good as the outfield prospect is, has to be available.
I don't see why not. I know I argue with Yankees fans, or in my case, talking to Tommy about it a lot. I told him I don't care about Spencer Jones. Jason Dominguez, I think, is legit, but like Spencer Jones, see you, dude. If we're truly all in on this Juan Soto year and we want to keep a Yankee full time, if you're Brian Cashman, Hal Steinbrenner, it shouldn't matter. Those prospects should not be on. Like, there should be no prospect off the table in these trade scenarios. All right, so
But I will say this is, in his time in the minor leagues, no one saw Aaron Judge as the kind of player he turned out to be. And therefore, there is a difference between trading Josh Smith and trading Aaron Judge.
Correct.
Now, there might be one Aaron Judge ever in the history of the game. Forget about just among Yankee prospects. But the Yankees drafted Spencer Jones as the athletic player who, very big, who they feel can close up some holes in his swing and play to his power and play the outfield at a high level. And, I saw Spencer Jones at the Futures game. What a nice kid. Talked to him for a while. I mean, really nice kid. And you saw some of it. I saw a line drive. I saw a stolen base. I saw a sliding catch in just like 5 innings, where you could sit and say, wow, like if we're just basing, that's an interesting kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a level ahead of Judge at the same age. And remember, Judge wasn't Judge in the minors. Like, he was never a top 25 prospect. He was a prospect, but he wasn't like Jackson Holiday or Jackson Churio were this year, where people are like, can't miss, #1 prospect in the game. So you do have to trust your infrastructure. If the people you've hired, this is why you need competent people, are telling you, Brian, you cannot trade this guy because there's a 60% chance he's going to be a multi-time all-star, then you can't. But this is it. I go back to one of the reasons the Yankees were a dynasty when they were a dynasty was they did great in the minor leagues under Brian Sabian and Bill Livesey. Just a lot of really talented players, especially that group that came at one time and was almost great from day one, the core 4 guys.
Yeah.
But Stick Michael orchestrated it, and he had a savantism for knowing the difference between Russ Davis and a high-level major leaguer. And knowing, hey, the industry thinks Russ Davis is one thing, but I know he's not. I've gone and seen him. In the Yankee organization, that's Tim Nearing, it's Matt Daly, it's some of their other scouts. They're not going to tell us publicly what they think of it. But if they're telling Brian Cashman, Brian, you could do anything between now and 6 p.m. July 30th, but you can't trade this guy, then you can't trade the guy, right? But if they're saying, hey, if there's still people in the industry who think this guy's a high-level all-star, we just think there's too many holes in the swing for a big guy, now's the moment to get as much as you can. But I guess my bigger point was you've got to – I know in previous trade deadlines where I talked to frustrated executives from other teams who tell me Brian Cashman's like taking 10 guys off the board. And it's just like, okay, that can't be this year when you have Soto, Judge, and Cole. Like, you could take 2, but you can't take 5.
Yeah, I guess me as
not
a
for
Yankees,
the right guy.
right?
If you're just doing David Robertson, Tanner Scott, and Ahmed Rosario, then you could protect a lot of guys.
Right.
And by the way, that might be the kind of haul that's worth several wins down the stretch and is good enough to get him in. And maybe what they do because they actually still believe in this current group. But yeah. Anyway, I just think that aggression has to be a big part of what they do in the next 8 days.
And that's what's so fascinating, right? Like you talk about the aggression and what prospects, do you feel you value and say we can't trade this guy or we can trade this guy. It's that kind of that surrounding pressure and aura in the Yankees, right? Like Yankees fans are desperate for this team to finally make a World Series, let alone win one, right? And we know we have this just timeline of we only have one thing guaranteed, and that's Juan Soto in the playoffs, barring health, right? Like that is the only thing we have guaranteed with this team. And we have Cole in his prime and Judge in his prime. And that is your chance to take whatever you can. And let's be honest, an American League that I think is not as strong as we may think it is, because the Orioles are gettable. Unless they make massive improvements to that rotation, they are gettable. The Astros are the Astros. I feel like they're going to be on there. The Mariners, this is their first time, it feels like, actually being in that competitive level. And the Guardians, I'm sorry, I'm always going to take the Yankees against an AL Central team in the playoffs. That's just how it is. So it just feels that immense pressure of them, to your point. Got to get after it. You got to go take your chance and swing at it. So let me throw a couple names at you, Joe, real quick, just because I know Tommy wanted me to mention these guys. And you tell me whether this is realistic, not realistic, or you go like, Ryan, that's bullshit, or get the fuck out of here. Matt Chapman. Any truth to a possibility of the Yankees making a move for a guy like him?
I think it would be on the board. I'm not sure. I think the giant executive baseball operations level is under a lot of pressure to try to get in this year. I don't think they're very good. But they're getting Robbie Ray and Alex Cobb back in the very short period here. And, Snell started to pitch well. So you got Snell, Webb, Harrison, Cobb, Ray. That's a pretty good group where you could believe, I just think that no one is very good in that massive 7 or 8 teams,
Right.
and nobody's terrible. And you could always, we just saw the Astros make up 10 games in 24 days. And it always just feels like it's so touchy now because of the trade deadline. You win one, you lose one, what should you do? But in the National League wildcard, if you have a 15-5 20-game period, you're going to be singing, man. And the Giants could feel with that starting pitching, why couldn't we? Now, if they decide they don't, it's in play with the problematic situation that a player with a player option is a very difficult trade, because if the player doesn't play well, he's going to pick up an option you don't want him to pick up. Right? And it's not for nothing. His option's 25-ish or something like that, if I'm remembering, Chapman. So it could be a booby prize for next year also. If he plays well, you're going to leave it. And then the question becomes, how do you trade for that player? Like the Giants are going to be saying, we're giving you a very good player for maybe a year and a half. So, or it's just for 50 games. So I think it's a very difficult player to imagine being traded well, if traded at all.
Okay. And then I got a couple other. You mentioned Ahmad Rosario. How realistic is that one? Luis Renifo. And also, I'll throw in Isaac Paredes and Vlad Guerrero. Those guys are infielders that you hear names in the trade deadline market. If you were to take the three that you think are actually realistic there of those names, we also mentioned Chapman there. I mean, who are the three you would say, actually, you know what? I could see that guy getting moved.
Well, Rosario's a free agent at the end of the year, so I'd be very surprised if he wasn't traded in the next 8 days. I think Tampa Bay is about as open a seller as there is now. They might do some buying also. They haven't completely given up, but they're going to certainly sell somebody who's a free agent to be like him. I strongly suspect Randy Rosarena will be on a different team come, again, Seattle, pick your team, the Dodgers, somebody before July 31st. I think they're going to trade another starting pitcher. They've got
Jeffrey Springs coming.
A Yankee person said this to me the other day. I was there on Sunday after Taj Bradley pitched on Saturday, and the guy said, "Did you see that guy's stuff? Can you imagine what him and Shane McClanahan are going to look like together?" But they don't get McClanahan until next year.
Right.
But they're getting Jeffrey Springs and Rasmussen back shortly, so they have the guy who pitched today, Zach Littell or Zach Eflin. Those are guys that can move in the next week. I think they'll be open on a release. I think they're very open, but for somebody like Paredes or Yandy Diaz, who have control and don't cost a ton moving forward, I think you're going to have to spend in a market where, to your point, and it's the correct point, Ryan, nobody hits well in the sport right now. You're going to have to spend $1.25 for $1 to get a hitter with control. You might have to spend $1.35. It's going to cost you a lot to get a hitter with control. I think emotionally, the Blue Jays don't want to trade Guerrero. I think they should. But if you just said, I have to bet, I would say they don't have the stones to do the right thing. But they should do it. And when somebody, I know, he had said he'd never play with the Yankees. And then recently, he'd said, softened and said it's a business. Me, I always say, oh, that's bullshit. Marcus Stroman and Brian Cashman hated each other till the moment they needed each other, right? Like the Yankees hate the 2017 Astros more than evil itself. And J.D. Davis became the third 2017 Astro to play for the Yankees. So, I hate to say it like this, but fuck all that bullshit. It's business. People will go where they need to go. So I think it's going to be very hard to find bats. There's still so many National League teams that are kind of the Nationals traded Hunter Harvey, then just had a great weekend. They get they have the same record as the Reds. How do the Reds decide? I don't think the Reds would do this. I'm going to throw out the name that I don't think, but if they put Spencer Steer into the marketplace, I think they'd get $1.35 for it. because I think he's actually a good hitter with a lot of control years. And the question, but they want to start winning next year if they're not going to win this year. So I think it's a tricky marketplace. I think a lot of buyers, not a lot of sellers, and yet the Yankees got to get some stuff done. And that's why I think you can name all the guys, and I think ultimately look at the relief market.
Okay.
Like, if you're a Yankee fan, hope against hope that somehow the Chicago White Sox play like an actual major league team for 3 days and kick the crap out of the Rangers, which would not only get David Robertson, Jose Leclerc, and Kirby Yates into the market, but by doing it would put more supply in the market and therefore potentially lower the prices in other places. And if you watch the Mets the last few days, I mean, Tanner Scott's got good shit. Like, that is good stuff. Now, I worry about him. He's not had a lot of experience in big games. He could get wild, but when the stuff is near the plate, pretty difficult to hit.
Hogan loves Tanner Scott. I know he's mentioned him a lot. He's a big proponent of trading for Tanner Scott, so we'll see what happens with that guy. Joel, let's move over to Radio Irrational. There's a thing that happened this weekend. I know you probably saw it today too. Jose Siri hits a home run, slow-ass trot around the bases. Juan Soto hits a monster home run, slow-ass trot around the bases. You know, they cut to Aaron Judge. He gives a little stare down. I to be honest with you, Joel, I don't think it matters. I think it's more a sense of, and I think Aaron Boone even alluded to this. Listen, we got to stop them from hitting the ball out of the fucking ballpark if we really are going to take notice of them going slow around the bases. I think that's just whatever. Jose Siri, whatever. The problem I do have, though, and this is my Radio Irrational take here, was Nestor Cortez. I don't know if you saw his tweet this week over the All-Star break, Joel. You know, he tweeted out and goes, this is what's funny. Everyone wants to talk down on the Yankees, but they want to be us. Every year we are in contention. I'm blessed to be able to compete for a playoff spot and always be contenders at the end. Except for the fact Nestor Cortez has been god-awful in his last 2 starts in between this tweet that he had sent out and in the midst of this Yankees team that has only won 1 effing series out of the last 9. I got a problem with that, Joel. I mean, I know, listen, I like fire. I like passion. I like that when players are like, yeah, I'm all for the squad. I'm all for winning and all that. But, like, if you're going to tweet that, prove it on the field. Show it and shove it down the throats of the other team that you're playing and pitch to the way you're supposed to be able to pitch. I got an issue with that. I don't know about you felt about that tweet. I mean, maybe it's nothing for you and you're like, it's one of those things that you find is bullshit. But I wanted to hear what you wanted to say about Nestor Cortez.
Almost across the board, I find all of this bullshit. So, like today, Jose Siri took about 35 seconds to get around the bases. You know who should have had a big problem with that? The Tampa Bay Rays. They were losing 4-0, and the game was made 4-1. This is the guy celebrating a touchdown like a nutcase when his team is down 35-7. Like, what do you? Again, like none of this. I mean, none of it bothers me because who cares ultimately? But do you have no feel whatsoever? Again, if it's the Yankees, I'd almost laugh. I'd point at the scoreboard and go, it's 4-1, asshole. And by the way, you're sellers at the trade deadline, and we're trying to make the play. Like all that kind of stuff. It's just this look at me stuff without any context or sense of appropriateness with it. So that's well, I would be madder if I were a Ray today than if I were a Yankee on that. As far as what Nestor Cortez did, I just think it's stupid to do it. And that's, by the way, if he was pitching to a 150 ERA and the Yankees were on a big winning streak. Like, what's the value of it? Like, is this like, it's clearly not going to psych up your team. It's all ephemeral. It's just spontaneous sugar high nonsense. Like, who cares? I will say that I know you're pointing out to these last 2 starts by Nestor Cortez. I think Nestor Cortez can handle, like, we talk a lot here about handling big games in New York. Nestor Cortez might fail. That guy is not afraid. Like, whatever he's got, you're going to get. He got yesterday. Like, gave up a lot of home runs. He finally didn't pitch well at home, where he had pitched great all year. But that guy, I just think so much of baseball, because there's such an inventory of games, Ryan, comes down to, like, who are you comfortable taking the biggest at bats, throwing the biggest pitches. If you told me the Yankees had a do-or-die game in the playoffs and Nestor Cortez was starting, I would say fine. Like, he might blow up, but I know he's not going to blow up because he's scared. He's psyched out by the moment. So, like, I think Nestor Cortez can handle this. And so 2 bad games, who cares? And ultimately that other stuff, that's just a generation or 2 before me of people who do shit like this on both things. The way that the running the bases and deciding you have to say something on social media. I would say to guys, do what you want. It's a free country. You're really not bothering me. I just wonder, is it the smartest thing to do? Like, what is appropriate in the moment?
Yeah, I hear you, Joel. I'm not saying Nestor's afraid of the moment. I never questioned like his fear or anything like that. But for me, why in that moment you had to feel the sense
But
to
why
tweet
in
that
any
out?
moment, Ryan? Like, would you have felt better if he did that and he had a 150? Or I just think I don't think it's the smart. Like
It's not smart because your team has been struggling now for 2 months.
Empty calories to me. If you have a big winning streak or a big losing streak, it's valueless.
Right.
Like, no, all you could do is get people like us talking about it. And I don't, with by the way, no tangible benefit to your ball club. And that's, by the way, if they're in a 10-game winning streak or a 10-game losing streak. So I always want, but by the way, if that's real, I don't want players to be PR spin. Right. If like you feel like that's what you've got to do it. I would say if I were his teammate, if I were his manager, his general manager, his pitching coach, I would just say, tell me the upside of it. Like, that is a success if what happens. I don't see the value of it. 10-game winning streak, 10-game losing streak. So I would say, if I were as a reporter, do what you feel is real. I deal with vanilla spun bullshit all the time. So I want you to do what you want to do. If I was his teammate, I would try to reverse engineer it and say, if this went spectacularly well, what would that look like? It would look like nothing. There is no spectacularly well for this. Like, it isn't like people are going to sit there and go, oh, Nestor Cortez is right. Everyone wants to be a Yankee.
I got you, Joel.
It's going to psych up the Yankee. I just think it's empty calories.
Yeah.
Like most bullshit on social media. It's all empty calories. I wish fucking people would stop. We'd live in a better country and world, but it's not going to stop.
No.
And so we all have to adjust to it. And that's the old man on the lawn is adjusting to it by saying, I don't really care. But if I was his teammate, like I was Jose Siri's teammate, I would say, and I was a veteran who could maybe talk to him, I'd say, tell me the benefit of this. Tell me how it worked out great.
Yeah.
Even to Jose Siri. We're down 4-0, man. Tell me the benefit of this. I know what the downside is. If the Yankees react old style, they're about to put one in your ear next time. So I know there's no benefit because that's just not great. You risk injury, then you risk a war on the field. Like, there is no psych 'em up, right? Like, you fucking guys got blown out today, so you certainly didn't psych up your team. So I don't get it. But it's not done for somebody in my demographic. But if I were his teammate, I'd say, I don't give a fuck what demographic I'm in. This is stupid fucking shit.
Well, speaking of what demographic it might be, I think it's for me and Hogan. So I'm going to bring in Tommy Hogan for Hogan Analytics. And before we get to you, Tommy, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Joel this as well. And I kind of got to bring it up because we got the Subway Series Part 2 coming up this week. What'd you think of Luis Severino's comments about, and mind you, he was right, but the Yankees lineups, 2 hitters. Everything else, ain't much.
Well, I hope he stops doing it. He'll have a better podcast than us. He was right.
All right, go ahead, Tommy.
I'm always with, but Luis Severino is one of the most. Luis Severino is as honest a Yankee as has existed in what I would call the let's kill fucking truth era of their time. Him and Jorge Posada would win the freaking contest.
Interesting. Well, I've got some stats to back up Luis Severino's comments about what you guys were talking about earlier, the complementary players just not being there for Judge and Soto. Now, these stats are before today's game, but in the 9 for 20 stretch, the the Yankees have 3 players in the bottom 5 of the entire league in WRC+. Verdugo, LeMahieu, and Volpe. Now, those numbers may have all gone up today because DJ homers, Volpe homers, Verdugo has a base hit, breaks his 0 for 20 slump. To find 3 players on the same team in that bottom portion of WRC+, I had to go 32 players deep, and it's the Seattle Mariners who had 3 in the bottom 32, and they just released one of those guys in Ty France. So that's a little interesting.
Kind of why I said they need Vlad Guerrero worse than the Yankees.
Sure, exactly. But it got me thinking because I want to throw Gleyber Torres into those 3 other players because it's the 4 guys on this team that just haven't come close to their expectations this season. So I tried to find think of a common denominator of those 4 guys.
I'm going to tell you what the common denominator is.
What is it, Joel?
They cannot get the ball in the air, those guys. Those guys are ground ball fucking machines.
They are, no question. Verdugo, I actually texted this stat to Ryan 3 weeks ago, and I saw a beat writer tweet it, I think it was yesterday. He leads all of baseball in ground balls to second base. It feels like every single at bat is a ground ball to second base.
And not only are they ground balls, but I know you guys watch the games also. These are not hard hit ground balls where you're like, that guy was positioned well or made a great play. Those guys lead the league in the 4-hop routine ground ball. Like Volpe and LeMahieu in particular, like they can't. Again, if I was looking for something encouraging to open the second half, Volpe has gotten the ball in the air.
Line drives again, like we saw in the first month or so of the season. Like he had the homer today, but he's also starting to hit the line drives up the middle into the opposite field, which is what we were asking from him all off season. Now I'll be honest.
It's a delicate balance, right? Because in previous years we'd say they were too homer reliant,
Right?
Sure.
And now it's kind of like I think they, as a team in general, have a lower strikeout percentage than in recent years, but there's a lot of weak outs, and so where's that happy medium between, to me, the exit velocity issue is it like these aren't like Aaron Judge hits ground balls, they get through. Like Juan Soto hits ground balls, Giancarlo Stanton, they hit ground balls, and again, these are the monsters of the sport. But LeMahieu used to hit the ball hard.
Right.
Like that was one of his secrets is like people are like, whoa, DJ LeMahieu. I'm like, do you watch DJ LeMahieu? The ball really comes off his bat and the numbers would back it up. And now they're not. And so every ground ball is just 5-3.
Or a double play, especially like Verdugo hitting cleanup behind Judge and Soto, who are always on base. Those ground balls were turning into 2 outs. I'll be honest, though, that was not the common denominator that I came up with.
I would have lost this game show.
Okay, well, this was more of my dumb Yankee fan brain here that came up with this common denominator.
They all have vowels in their last name.
Not that
all
dumb.
have vowels in
Not that dumb. Promise it's not that dumb. Those are the 4 guys that we were debating before the season started who should hit leadoff. Volpe, Torres, Verdugo, DJ LeMahieu before he got hurt. Those were the 4 guys we said which one of those 4 are going to hit in front of Judge and Soto.
And then I was saying earlier what a musical chair has been for 1 and 4, right? Because none of them have answered the question. And I almost wonder now, Tommy, if he should put Gleyber at 1, be somewhat assured that with Soto and Judge behind him, like to me, Gleyber is the guy. I know, look, I'm probably wrong about it. I know he's a good hitter. I know he's in the prime of his career. And I would just say for the next 100 plate appearances, since everything sucks as it is, and Ben Rice is kind of like they've all figured out the kryptonite with him, I'm going to put the righty hitter in front of the lefty Soto, a guy with a track record. I'm not stealing bases anyway from up there, right? And so I think what I would do is just put Gleyber there and say, I believe in you, dude. Now, I know that might not have the power of a Nestor Cortez tweet, but that's what I would do as a statement to Gleyber. There's 50 games left, man. I know you think this season has created something for free agency or whatever. You got 50 games and maybe 15 to 20 more in the postseason. I'm putting you in the leadoff spot. It's the greatest place to bat in the sport. You're hitting in front of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. They're arguably, with Soto, the 2 of the 3 best hitters in the whole sport, right? That's where I'm putting you. You're going to get strikes. Go play great the rest of this year. It's still money out there for you, man.
And we know Glaber's
that's what I would do. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've been I would hit Wells in a more prominent spot.
Right.
The other one, and he's finally moved up to cleanup. The one guy with a track record who's still in his prime is Glaber. And it just might be he's going to have a 620 OPS this year. It's not going to be good. But I remember that second half last year. Freaking ball came off his bat.
Well, we know.
I'm going to show a lot of confidence in the guy and see what happens.
And we know he's a guy that kind of needs that sort of thing. He gets in his own head, and we've kind of chalked up this bad season to, well, this is probably his last year as a Yankee. That could be getting in his head. So maybe once he gets past the trade deadline, we saw a few years ago when he was on the trade market right after that, and he didn't get traded. He was like, he had a bad August because he was like, oh my God, I just almost got traded. So maybe now that he clears the trade deadline, he can be like, okay, I am a Yankee for the next 2 months. Let's go. And maybe that works.
Maybe the Yankees should do the dual thing, Tommy. If they know for sure he's not getting traded in the next 8 days, they should say, not only you're not getting traded, but you're our leadoff man.
Sure, maybe.
See, I know it's not Jose Siri trotting around the bases for encouragement, but I just think he's your best chance for an 800 OPS over the last 50 games, not named Soto and Joe.
I would agree that I tend to lean that the leadoff hitter, I don't know if is on the team right now. Like Ahmed Rosario, if they trade for him, which just sounds like a legitimate possibility, he was asked post game like yesterday, like that's a guy that could hit leadoff. Hits well against left.
He was asked because I suggested to Dan Martin that he go.
There we go. That's our guy.
We love Dan.
That's our guy.
Don't tell anyone.
Nope, we won't. We won't tell him.
Even though I told Dan, play it low, because in my column that's coming out on Tuesday morning, I'm going to mention some stuff about Ahmed Rosario. Also, don't tell anybody. Let's keep this.
But another guy,
but I would like. There's probably a half dozen teams, again, including Seattle, the Dodgers, that could use at the bottom of their lineup or the top of their lineup some more heft. And this is a guy who can hit lefty. So like, there's just not. Everyone recognizes the Yankees' level of desperation. A team in their division who does spring training in their city, like the Yankees do spring training in their city, they're not going to make it easy for them to get even a walk-year player. They're going to squeeze the Yankees to get a lot or send them someplace else. So, like, I just wouldn't assume anybody. There's a lot of contenders who need everyone needs bats and everyone needs bullpen. The Yankees need a bat or two, and they need a bullpen arm or two. It's not going to be an easy road to it. And yet I suspect that Brian Cashman will pull down at least one of each, if not two of each.
Can I float another guy that I think I know how you're going to feel about it, but I think could solve the leadoff role? What about Jazz Chisholm?
No shot in the world.
What? He would lead. He would lead the team.
Not for free. Not for free.
He's a left-handed hitter. He gives him some power.
I'm aware. I watch baseball. I know he's a left-handed hitter.
Well, no, I'm listing the reasons why I think he does make some sense.
You can play on your team
as a Yankee target. Say that again.
You can play on your team. I would say this is I would work hard to get Vlad Guerrero Jr. That would be my guy.
I get that he's the bat that would make it a 3-person lineup. He would be the best bat out there, but he doesn't. Like, they still have issues at third and second base, whether they get Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Got it. I got it. If they got Jazz Chisholm, they'd still have issues at third and second base.
Okay. That's what I was asking. Fair enough.
Tommy.
Which means they'll probably get him.
Oh, come on.
Pretty much every guy I said I wouldn't get in the offseason. Verdugo, Stroman, Grisham. 2 years ago, Rodon. Like, the Yankees certainly don't have the same taste I do. So
we know it's a team that they're going to be talking to because we know they're talking to.
I would never trade for Jazz Chisholm or Michael Kopech. So I'm assuming that Jazz Chisholm and Michael Kopech will be Yankees.
Mark it down.
You
know. Real quick with Tommy here, Joel, and I wanted to ask this to you too. Did the John Birdie setback hurt this a little bit and put more of an impact in what the Yankees might be doing here at the deadline? Or is this like, John Birdie's a bench player. He's a nice piece that we have that we're hoping to get back here sometime.
Well, in theory, John Birdie. So remember, the Yankees finished second for Ahmed Rosario in the offseason.
Right.
He went to Tampa Bay instead of the Yankees. And what they did is acquire John Birdie. In a trade, they tried to get Enrique Hernandez, then they tried to get Ahmad Rosario. They didn't get either, and then they traded for Birdie. So in theory, if Birdie came back and showed for 10 days, oh, he's our speed against lefties, can play third base, move around the field a little, it might have taken – I still would have gone and gotten another guy who could hit lefties like Rosario and move around a little and have some depth to do it, and maybe put Oswaldo Cabrera in the minor leagues as just some depth there, or use Oswaldo Cabrera in a trade who still has like teams kind of like him, out there. Yeah, I obviously, but this is, I'll add this, it's kind of a non sequitur except for it exists within this world, is everyone has injuries. And I've heard a lot of this bemoaning of like, well, what a shame, like Jason Dominguez isn't healthy now, whatever. Right. But the general manager of the Yankees said quite prominently in the offseason that Giancarlo Stanton was going to get hurt. You know what the miracle was? That he didn't get hurt while Jason Dominguez was rehabbing from his Tommy John, right? Like if he got hurt in May, Jason Dominguez couldn't play, or April or whatever. So it's like the idea that Jason Dominguez isn't playing now for Giancarlo Stanton is like, okay, like everybody's got injuries, freaking figure it out. And by the way, Jason Dominguez played 7 games in the major leagues. He looked for 7 games, a lot like Ben Rice looked for 7 games. Like, can I see a season before we actually have to clear room in Monument Park for somebody?
If I can make a comment about John Birdie real quick. When I saw that he had a setback, and respect to John Birdie and his family, I whispered blessing in disguise. I was a little worried that the Yankees were going to be like depending on him to be the
Yankees,
third
so
baseman.
they have to get at least one.
Okay, thank God.
I don't think they see John Birdie as a back. I think they see John Birdie as a complimentary help.
Okay, I hope so.
And whatever gets Shemai Jones off this fucking roster. All right, thank you,
Shemai
Tommy.
Jones actually is in very few at bats has the 3rd best OPS versus lefties.
Yeah,
Pretty good as a starter,
but
too.
I'll say this on my bingo.
The man
card.
can't lay down a bunt though when you need him though. So let's be real here.
Yeah, I mean,
Nobody
Shemai
can.
Jones on my bingo card. I didn't have him still on the team on July 22nd.
Thanks, Tommy. All right, Joel. I was asked to remind you of this. Jose Canseco for Joel's notebook. I want to hear what this is about. What do you got, man?
So you asked me for Joel's notebook, see if I come up with a trade something. It's not trade deadline, but my first year on the beat was 89. Between 89 and 90, a story came out in the Daily News that the Yankees were talking seriously to the A's about acquiring Jose Canseco for Roberto Kelly and 2 pitchers named Bobby Munoz and Mark Hutton, who were like decent pitching prospects back then. And it was just before the winter meetings, so we're at the winter meetings. And Sandy Alderson is the general manager of the Oakland A's. And a small group of us see Sandy, including me and John Heyman, who works for Newsday at that point. And we run down Sandy Alderson and we ask him about the report. And he said, remind me, Sandy, very funny. He said, who's in the report? And we said, oh, it's Jose Canseco for Roberto Kelly, Bobby Munoz, and Mark Hutton. He goes, gentlemen, those players can't rent Jose Canseco for a week. Which was a good moment to say that the Daily News story was inaccurate. But it was about as good a denial of a trade line as I've ever heard. Gentlemen, those players do not rent Jose Canseco for a week.
I'm always fascinated, Joel, when you're in these moments, right? Like, is there ever like, are you close to the GM? Like, I know you always wait for after the post trade deadline, like that presser, right? Like to pester the GM, like what moves you did make, what moves you didn't make. Is there the moments like you're waiting as you're seeing the rumors, and I know you're active on your phone, you're talking to people. There's like anything you could tell us or maybe not tell us or hint at, like, holy shit, if this move went through, like I would have been like floored if there was anything like that happen in your time covering baseball?
Well, a few things. Number one, I'd be very careful about the words I use, as I always am. I don't think I pester anybody. I ask pertinent questions that the people we're supposed to hold power to accountability, and I think that that's what I do. It's not pestering.
I'm sorry, I take that back. What, Joel?
I understand.
I respect the hell out of you because I know you hold a lot of people accountable, which is why a lot of Yankees fans love reading what you write, and that's the truth. To
and
be
the
honest,
second thing is, and hopefully it's one of the reasons why people talk to me, is the world we live in, people tell me things all the time in confidence that I can't write. And that includes ever. And that's probably a longer list of what I can write. And the constant battle is to get what's interesting on the record and into print, which is an art. And you work with people and say, like, hey, I think there's a really interesting story. I think the fans would be fascinated by this. How can I navigate this? But there's been ones where people have told me stuff, Ryan, and didn't tell me I couldn't write it. And I've told the person, literally, you're the only person who could have told me this. The breadcrumbs will lead back to you and you'll end up getting fired. So I'm not going to report this. So, because I want to, like, there's no one story, unless it's like a nuclear bomb is about to hit us or something. There's no singular story that's worth ruining a relationship that might develop into 50 stories.
Right.
And that the trust that's built, and it's why access is so important, where people get to know if you're a real human being or not. Do you have morals? Do you have a sense of humor? Can you be trusted? All this stuff. This is the kind of stuff you're trying to show people, that you could trust me with information, that I know how to use the information. My first responsibility is to the reader or the listener, the viewer. But I'm not just going to do my job today.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's one of the things I don't like about the social media is everything is treated as a singular event. Like, why didn't you write this? Well, I've written several million words in my time. We have a 750-word hole here. I can't write the history of the universe in the 750. You do the best that you can in it. And you're treating this like the only thing I've ever reported on something. It's always you didn't kill Brian Cashman. And I'm like, well, here's the 40 columns where I killed Brian Cashman. It's like, there is no never.
Right.
Like, I've done this for a long time, and I think you know me well enough. I just don't give a fuck.
No.
Like, to the extent of, I have enough friends. I'm not trying to make friends. I'm trying to write the best column I can, full of information and entertainment and insight and all that. And that all can't be accomplished in one column. The good thing, I'm going to get to write another one tomorrow and the day after, and until the day they tap me on the shoulder and go, you're kind of senile now, you need to drop out of the race, so to speak. But like, until that happens, it's you see my frustration with things like aggregators or the the singular statement stuff on social media that has so much weight today. And it's like reading the first chapter of a book and saying, well, let me tell you everything about this book. And, well, you haven't read all the chapters. And so I get it. I have to adapt to this world. I have to adapt. Like, the world isn't going to change for me, and I don't want to be a dinosaur. So I'm on a webcast with somebody much younger than me who has a different worldview.
Yes.
Do a podcast with John, like it's a different thing. I do television. I write a column in a completely different way than I wrote it 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. You have to adapt, but I want to have certain standards about it. And the most important standard, to a degree, is I'd like to believe I'm a trustworthy, moral person. And I think it's very hard for people to share information with you if they don't think you're a trustworthy, moral person. And like, if you like what I do, because suddenly go, oh, that's interesting. There's a lot of information there. Like, there's a lot of information there because over time, people have come to trust that they can share the information with me, and I'll understand it and produce it in a way that doesn't cost people their jobs, but does meet my number one goal, which is my job is to the reader, viewer, listener. Like, that's who I'm at the honor of working for, ultimately. And that's never a single tweet. Like, can I destroy somebody in a single tweet? Sure, it's ephemeral. Nobody will remember in 48 hours, but it will have cost me a relationship. Maybe it will cost me my job. kind of seems like a shitty way to go about it to me.
I think you bring up a fascinating point, Joel, and that's kind of where I was going towards a little bit, and I'm happy you went there. Is with respect to what you do and what you work for, and what you've been telling these stories and these columns that you've been writing, and the everything that you do around this sport is what we consume. And in that minute, like you say, a lot of media consumption now is all about that single tweet or that single video or that one thing that you're just wanted to get that information from, and then you process it and you're like, well, you didn't read everything else. You didn't get the full picture of everything else. And I think what you do so well is that you're willing to adapt and you're willing to do these things with us. And I'm appreciative of that.
You're very kind, but like, and again, I admit how much what the aggregators do bother me, because they will on NewJersey.com and all the other scumbag places, they'll be like, MLB Insider says Yankees are close on Rosario. And of course, I didn't say that on this show. Or Yankees are getting Vlad Guerrero. And I didn't say that. And
nope.
Like by proxy, I could lose credibility, and it has nothing to do with me. And it's like, maybe I should lose. If I lose credibility, can it at least be about me, as opposed to some dishonest third party purposely, for the purposes of clicks, misrepresenting what I write or say. It feels like not a great part of our ecosystem. Like, I don't think it's really, like, I get it, you get a click, but again, our job is to inform readers. And, we all, man, I failed a lot over the years. Like, I got a story, man, I thought he meant this or whatever, but like, you're trying your best. Like, the beautiful thing about this job is if it went perfect, you get to tell people the truth. What a great job. Like, I love that about this job. Like, that's what you're doing. You get to inform people with real information and the truth. And we have this kind of whole now infrastructure that fucks with the truth.
It does.
On purpose. And I just think it's not nourishing. I understand the endorphins go off when you see headlines. Who are the Yankees getting? You'll never believe it. And then you hit it, and it's not the truth. It's a purposeful overselling and misrepresentation of something that somebody else worked very hard during a long career to gather the information to actually put in context. Like, the context is the Yankees could really use somebody who hits lefty pitching well. They did have contact with Ahmad Rosario in the offseason. He would be someone who could fill what they want at a time where we know the Rays are sellers. There's a lot of actual things that I know because I've reported it over time there. The Rays are sellers. How close I think I was the one who first broke that the Yankees were close on Rosario back in the spring. Like things like that. And then in a couple of keystrokes, MLB Insider could be purposely misinterpreted. And it's like, well, aside from your click, like, who was that good for? Certainly not the people we're supposed to be working for, which is people who are nice enough to spend money to read us or come to this site and watch it. Like, people are using their time and energy, and we owe them something. And I think that other thing destroys our credibility. And you're always working to keep your credibility. So anyway, I kind of went off on a ridiculous tangent here about this, but there's not a lot of forums for me to talk about how frustrating it is.
But that's what Joel's Notebook is for, though. That's what I want to open it up for you to have these. And
I could lie and act like it doesn't bother me, but a lot of, as you see, a lot of internet stuff doesn't bother me because I know but I know that this specific thing is actually correctable if we wanted to correct it.
Joel, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing how this next week goes with the Yankees and how they approach this trade deadline. I know we're going to be talking to you next week. We'll figure that out. But as always, man.
Next Monday will be a day before the deadline. So our question is, should we wait till like Tuesday night or Wednesday morning? We'll have to figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I have faith that we can do this. And
we did this on the spur of the moment.
Exactly. Right? And that's what I appreciate you the most, is that you're giving us that time. Joel, thank you so much, man. I know you got a super busy week this next week. As always, thank you, man.
All the best.
Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post trade deadline special with the one and only Joel Sherman, who is a busy man today to say the least, but he made some time for us to break down the Yankees trade deadline moves that they did and didn't make, obviously. But let's start off with welcoming in Joel. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. I'm sitting in Ron Darling's office at MLB Network. I just got done with about 7 straight hours of television. Just wrote a column for the New York Post. But Ryan, you're on my freaking dance card, and we're gonna dance.
Listen, I'm just happy to get a chance to dance with you here. And as always, talk about what happened here at the Yankees trade deadline. So, Joel, we've been talking about it all year. This team, the way they performed the first 2 months and then the last month and a half, the way it's gone, it's been a Jekyll and Hyde situation for this team. And we knew that there needed to be moves to be made. There were holes to be addressed with this roster. So, just starting off with your initial thoughts, what are you thinking about what the Yankees were able to make in moves for this team and helping improve what they're trying to do?
My initial thought is a big picture league wide one, which is I feel like a lot of Yankee fans will say, where is the star power in this trade deadline? And I would say, where is the star power in this trade deadline for 30 teams? We didn't, all 30 teams didn't get Vlad Guerrero Jr. All 30 teams didn't get Yandy Diaz. All 30 teams didn't get Blake Snell, Tarek Skubal, etc. So Garrett Crochet. This was a supplementary, complementary trade deadline. And if I were thinking about it for the Yankees, the term that keeps coming to mind is they shot par. What did they have to do? They had to find at least one more bat that they feel could help the team. And under the best circumstances, Jazz Chisholm has a lot of qualities that the Yankees could use. Not least among them is he's an explosive player. And as we know, they don't create a lot of runs on the base path. There are all these extra problematic situations. If you look at like the Yankees, how many stolen bases they allow compared to how many stolen bases they have, how many double plays they hit into compared to how many double plays they turn. Well, those are 90 feet that aren't going away, and they have kind of a way of winning, which is, can their two great players get the ball over the fence a lot, and some of the complementary players chime in. When some of those complementary players chime in, like has happened over most of the last week, their offense looks very good. When they don't, their offense is a two-man show, and is it enough? So I think Chaz Chisholm could help if the bright lights in the big city kind of get his full attention. His reputation in Miami was as a very talented player, but one whose performance and attention could drift. Does this galvanize him? He's playing with a veteran crew. There'll be a full crowd, especially at home every day, which he didn't have in Miami. Does this focus him? We'll see. It's an interesting question because he is talented and has talents the Yankees need. The other thing that was part of this deadline is they had to get some strikeout performance out of their bullpen. Mark Leiter Jr. strikes out about 33%, and Yel De Los Santos strikes out about 28%. The Yankees as a bullpen are at about 23%, which I believe going into today was 18th or 19th in the major leagues. So they needed to get some swing and miss. And so that was par in what felt like a very complimentary marketplace all around. They kind of did what everyone else, and now we'll see, did their front office do well? Better complimentary than anyone else. I hate to ramble, but I would say that one of the most important things that happened for them in the small picture, for sure, which is the division, is Baltimore had the same kind of deadline. Zach Eflin's a good pitcher. If he shows up to start in a playoff series, I don't think everyone's going to be quaking in their boots. Trevor Rogers is a project. The kind of guy maybe a great analytical organization like Baltimore could fix, but that's hard to do mid-pennant race with the last 2 months. We'll see if they can do that because he's talented, but he is far from finished product. They added 2 relievers that the Phillies, who have the best record in the National League, couldn't wait to get off their roster so they could trade for 2 other relief pitchers. And Eloy Jimenez was a straight-out salary dump by the White Sox. So is the best thing that happened to the Yankees today that nothing great happened with the Orioles? And really, across the sport, maybe. That's how it kind of feels a little bit to me. And now this is a battle of which front offices did the best at adding around the edges.
Yeah, that's kind of what the vibe and the feel of this trade deadline, to your point about what was added and where the moves were going. I guess I want to start with that Jazz Chisholm move because that's what came on Saturday, right? Initially for this Yankees team. And, we had spoken last week and Tommy had brought up the name Jazz Chisholm to you. And you said, not even for free, not even for free. And now all of a sudden we see Jazz on the Yankees team. You saw the impact. As we're speaking right now, they're playing the Phillies right now. And he had 2 home runs last night. He's playing third base, a position he hasn't played yet in the majors. So the Yankees are using that versatility, right? He could play second, he could play third, it looks like, in the first initial looks at it, and he could play outfield for them. Ultimately, for this move, is this just a matter of you're waiting and seeing before you make a judgment, or are you impressed with, the Yankees got a pretty decent player, one that's versatile, one that can play multiple positions, and brings energy and speed and athleticism to this team that desperately needed it on its lineup?
Yeah, what I do is I always am trying, I'm in the business of watching the games and I draw opinion from afar. And by asking people, I respect what they think and what they're seeing and hearing. Once a guy gets to New York with either the Mets or the Yankees, I try to be as open-minded as possible. There are players who I thought very little of who came here, and I ended up saying better guy, better player than I thought. And there are players who have played for the Mets and Yankees who, when they came here, I thought, wow, what a good addition. And I was underwhelmed by them in every way you could be underwhelmed. I'm thinking, I won't say the name, is like the Mets made a trade one year when they were good, and I thought they got absolutely a guy who was perfect for them. And then that guy was around, and I was like, oh, this guy's really a selfish player and not good for a kind of team vibe. And you only learn that when you're kind of around all the time. So the book's open for me on Jazz Chisholm, and I'll just go back. On a piece of graph paper, and I think this is how the Yankees generally do business, on a piece of graph paper, Jazz Chisholm looks great. And in short bursts, if you're there with the Marlins, he looks great. But go talk to people with the Marlins who had to live with it for 162 games. And that's why I'm wondering, can it drift because there's 4,000 people in the crowd? Can it drift because there's not strong veteran leadership? Could it drift because there's not a media that will hold you to a larger accountability than in other places? He is a talented player, talented enough that his performance should actually be better than it has been to date. I'll say this. You know who I just described? Paul O'Neill. Paul O'Neill was less than the sum of his parts, came to New York, to a place where he kind of like was awed by Don Mattingly. And like, it was perfect for him. And he rose to a well above average player, way beyond complementary. Is that in Jazz Chisholm? Maybe. We'll see. They needed to add. And is Isaac Paredes better? I don't know. Who's the third best position player that got traded? I mean, Yandy Diaz didn't go, who I thought would have been a good ad for them, because I think Yandy Diaz can really hit good pitching. And when you're playing another of these, at least what they claim, championship or bust seasons, I always think you want guys who can hit good pitching because that's what you're going to get in the biggest games. He didn't get moved. Like all the other 29 teams didn't get him from Tampa Bay, and neither did the Yankees. So obviously there was a high price on him, and it didn't happen. There were not, nobody wanted Cody Bellinger, and so I'm like thinking, who moved of significance? Chisholm and Paredes, are those the two best?
Yeah, I mean Lane Thomas, you really wouldn't say. Tommy Edman, Dylan.
Who the Yankees tried for. The Yankees actually wanted Tommy Edman. But I just think it's the big picture, Ryan, which is this was not a marketplace where you were like, wow, Manny Machado was traded. That kind of thing. And by the way, the year Manny Machado got traded, he was underwhelming to the Dodgers. Again, the Dodgers only knew that once he was a Dodger. So, yeah, I think he is I really do want to watch him play,
Right.
because on a team that's built with not a lot of exciting players besides when Soto and Judge are swinging, Chisholm has a live body, and now I'm curious what it looks like here.
And ultimately for you, when you're looking at where they slot him, could you see him being the everyday third baseman? I mean, DJ LeMahieu wasn't starting any of those 3 games in Boston. He didn't start last night. He's not starting again tonight. It seems like maybe he's been slid down on that bench. We saw JD Davis and Jahmai Jones finally get DFA'd. So for Chisholm, could that be a position where it's like, hey, man, there's an opening here because we gave DJ LeMahieu all the opportunity here to earn that third base spot. And if Jazz Chisholm can earn it, do you think that that's a position you could see him slotted in every single day at third base?
I think that's where he's going to play a large majority of the games, unless any of the following happens. Judge gets hurt, and they decide they'd rather have him out in the outfield, or another outfielder gets hurt, and they want him out in the outfield more. But even then, I think they just bring Dominguez up and keep him probably at third base. Or, look, we should get into this more as we do the show, but who the hell is Gleyber Torres this year? It fits into my can't play for me team. Even in the good times, the last few days, the attention drifts away. And at some point, you just can't have everyone on the bench. LeMahieu's on the bench now, but does Chisholm move to second base because the Yankees just decide, hey, man, we can't have you just not playing well on defense on every game. But I would suspect they hope Gleyber's bat, which has been much better for about a month now, continues, and Chisholm could handle third base. But, learning third base on the go, as athletic as he is, there's some challenge there. I'm curious what it looks like. This is one of those ones I'd rather not start doing report cards after every game. I'd rather get a month and then say, let's see what it looks like in every way.
That's understandable. I can see why you'd want to see how Jazz. I mean, it's impressive. I know I was watching the game last night, and he first chopper. It's a tough bouncer. He made a great play on it. Almost turns a double play if Gleyber doesn't make that throw.
He's clearly a self-confident player.
Yes, and he's got the athleticism and the tools to the point of what they're hoping for. Another thing is he also control for the next couple of years for them, so they do have a future outlook here. If Gleyber Torres doesn't work out at second base for him in the future, it's like we could slot him back.
Well, I think we know Gleyber Torres isn't going to work out for them.
We'll get to Gleyber and his comments in a little bit, Joel. So to the other side of the Jazz Chisholm trade, what they gave up in the prospects and Ramirez, the catcher. What did you make of that? Did you think that this was an overpay? This was a fair trade considering what you saw the rest of the market and how it developed?
Yeah, so I think the Yankees had a conundrum besides the not great stuff to get at the deadline, was even if they wanted to try to get into better stuff. From what I understood, they told teams Jason Dominguez was off the table. That was not a player they wanted to discuss. And they'd only discuss Spencer Jones and George Lombard in real difference-making trades, and they clearly didn't get there. Well, even Dominguez and Lombard, they're fine prospects, but they're not top 25, top 30 in the sport prospects. The Yankees have traded a ton of prospects, especially over the last 4 years, particularly pitching. So there was less of it. They suffered a lot of injuries in their minor leagues this year. Everson Pereira was out for the year. Chase Hampton, I think, literally came back from another injury today as we're talking. Some of their lower guys, Henry Lillane, etc., were hurt a lot this year. And then they just had guys kind of fall off the rails a little bit, including the guy who's starting tonight for them in Philadelphia, Will Warren, who was battling for a rotation spot with Luis Gil in spring training, and then ended up with like a 6 ERA at AAA. And now people had told me he had pitched better recently, but so their farm system was not in great shape. And therefore, the scouts I talked to told me 3 of the names who came up as good secondary prospects got traded. Agustin Ramirez, Cerna, and the guy who went today for Leiter Cows. I think that those are the kind of guys you have to trade to do anything. The one that comes up the most when I talk to people is there's this feeling that there's upside in Ramirez's bat. We'll see. Historically, Brian Cashman has been very, very good at trading prospects with very little pain long term, showing up on the other side of it. So, this is going to take years to know for sure. But they traded the kind of prospects they had to trade to even do supplementary things, and they held on to the guys that they thought were the best of their group. And I will add one other thing: is you mentioned Chisholm has control, so does Leiter and De Los Santos have control beyond this year. And in the bullpen, where Clay Holmes is a free agent, Loizaco, who's missing the whole year, is a free agent. Tommy Canley is a free agent. They probably need to have more guys they think could be part of, if not a closer conversation, then at least a strong setup conversation. So I'm curious how Leiter and De Los Santos do if they become not just guys who help this year, but help moving forward.
Well, that's where I wanted to go to next, was with both for Leiter and De Los Santos, is how do you see these two guys slotting into this bullpen as currently constructed? We also saw the news that the Yankees traded with the Astros, which is something we've discussed here as well, that they don't do that very much, but Ferguson gets shipped off to the Astros, so you now lose another lefty. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, Tim Hill's the only left-handed bullpen pitcher they have now at this point. They didn't get Tanner Scott, right? Like the big left-handed guy on the market. They didn't pay that astronomical price that the Padres paid for him. So where do you see ultimately Leiter and De Los Santos sliding into the bullpen here for the Yankees?
Well, they did sign Brett Phillips, the former outfielder, a left-hander who's been throwing 97 in the independent league. So we'll see how fast and far he could come. Tim Hill's the guy. Doesn't feel like there's an obvious guy sitting down in Double or Triple A who they could get at this point. Trading season is officially over, so you're not getting them from outside. I think the key item, sorry to be redundant, Ryan, is the swing and miss. The Yankees have lost a bunch of games in extra innings. You start with a runner at second. If you can't strike anyone out, hard to stop that runner from scoring. And we've just seen, you put the ball in play enough, there'll be hits and mistakes, etc. So they needed to get it. And I'll throw in one other name that I think becomes important. Ian Hamilton pitched really well for the Yankees last year. They can really use him to show up again. Does Lou Trevino show up again? Does Scott Efros show up again? Does Nick Burdi, who has some overpowering stuff, but has really spent 10 years never being healthy as a professional baseball player? So there's other options. By the way, they're all right-handed, as you mentioned, but I think it's going to be this kind of legion ball of relief pitchers where he feels like he has more places to go. And I think it'll be interesting because the one thing the Yankees have been excellent at over the last several years is the ability to take relief pitchers and find the best of them. Like Tim Hill has pitched much better for the Yankees than he was pitching for the White Sox. Jake Cousins has pitched pretty well. Michael Tonkin has pitched way better for the Yankees than he did for the Mets. Cousins has options. I assume he'll go down to allow either De Los Santos or and Leiter up for one spot. I think the other spot will be interesting, who they decide goes in that scenario. But I think that Boone will be open to, especially Leiter. Can he pitch the eighth inning?
Yeah.
Because I think in the best circumstances, they would try to use Luke Weaver as an attack dog for more than an inning. Like, hey, Stroman goes short. Can we just throw Weaver in the game in the third or fourth inning to keep the Yankees connected? And if they're connected, then go to a better group of late inning relievers. So I think especially Leiter, to me, falls into the category of, can he pitch the eighth inning?
Yeah, that's ultimately where we're looking at here, right, Joel? Because you've kind of talked to me a little bit with Holmes and that, listen, there are worse closers out there in baseball. He's a guy that's going to pitch to contact. You got to play good defense behind him. You know what you're getting basically in Holmes and closing games. But we asked that situation of, could the Yankees get a guy like Tanner Scott who can potentially close games for you in a pinch if Holmes continues to struggle or he goes in a slump, or, and have that versatility. So with a guy like Leiter, it seems like, is he going to be that late inning guy that you can rely on maybe in a pinch? If let's say Holmes goes 3 out of 4 in a day, at closing games, that, hey, maybe Leiter can close a game for us. I don't know. Like, how do you envision that could be possibility with Leiter? Or is he just mostly going to be, like you said, maybe like that 6, 7, maybe that 8th inning guy for you?
I think it's probably all TBD, and I think probably Aaron Boone feels it will be TBD. Let's see how these guys handle New York, which we know can be a different kind of beast. Does Mark Leiter have some advantage that both his dad and uncle played for the Yankees at some point? Maybe. I'll throw out one that I think about a lot. I don't think they could do it because I think he's a good starting pitcher. We'll see if he could do it to the end. When Clark Schmidt comes back, can Luis Heel be a guy they use at the end of games? In the way that like Adam Wainwright at the beginning of his career ended up at the end of games, closing for a championship Cardinal team. By the way, I think it's an option if his innings need to be limited at the end, and or Schmidt comes back good. And where do the Yankees sign up for that? Right, like Garrett Cole isn't starting tonight with whatever general achy body is.
Are you concerned about that real quick? Because I wanted to ask you about that too.
I mean, if I were the Yankees, first of all, are they full of shit and they know there's more going on? Because like that was not an injury for the first 35 years of my career. And now I've heard both Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole have general body achiness. Maybe it's because I'm an old man. I have general fucking body achiness every day. I assume every baseball player after about a week